Mic check. Good morning. We get this started. We welcome everybody back. I've been back, so it was good in summer. Hope you guys had a good time off and enjoyed your whatever you guys do during the summertime and all that kind of stuff. So, big school year again. Last year, of course, in my first year, and we hit a home run. I want to thank you guys. But you guys do what you're doing, the rest of us can be successful. And I really mean that. So I want to thank you for last year, and this year is a big year also. So we got one more year of how we do this, and we'll all change next year when we get to the next school bill. So the shuttles and all that kind of stuff we end up changing down the road. So I look forward to that, getting back to the world that I know about when we have neighborhood schools and things like that. So a little bit different. But anyway, we're going to focus on this year. So we got a lot to do. We're going to get started. We got Debbie passing out, I think, sign-up sheets for Baltimore passages and things like that. So we'll sign it, make sure we get it back, and we'll get this thing started. Saving your voice. We got lucky this time. Ready? Everybody want to know
back here. This is a test, so. Yeah, I'll get that. Nobody likes tests.
I'm just telling all the football guys that's what.
Okay. Okay, my name is Debbie Bland, and I'm your public health nurse here for the Jeffrey School District. So when I pass out these bloodborne pathogens tests, you can answer the questions as the video goes, and we'll go over them afterwards, so don't stress too much about the test. It's really just for information. This is your annual update on bloodborne pathogens, and we just want to make sure that you're protected and know how to dispose of blood and things like that. When your children are on the bus, I know that a lot of times you guys may see things that I had reported to me where kids having accidents in their pants. So we had urine or feces or bed bugs, lice, vomit, nosebleeds. Those are the kinds of things that you're probably exposed to on your routes. And so that's what this is going to cover, just how to protect yourself when you're taking care of the students for these issues. So we'll watch the video, and it's pretty painless, and then we'll talk about the use of gloves, and then we'll do the test, okay? Go ahead. Yep, just hit play. The play program.
I wasn't given a chance to study, so I ain't taking it. Now, I
Who's doing the vision? Oh, that red. You want my glasses? You got that memorized. You got that memorized. 25 years ago. You're talking to the doctor? The doctor? Hell. Can't hear it. Which one you want? Yeah. That one? Yeah, let's give this a whirl.
That was my glass.
I prefer to see you now. Bring red.
Oh, whip them upside down, girl. Take the plug out of his ear. Well, I had that in, now it's really real. Especially this goes back. You know how they are. That way we can get together and tell us what we need and what we can say with our program card.
Now, they want to do all year or once a month.
Well, and that's the thing.
We've got a weather system. We need a strong seal without this virus in it. It's got to do that. It's got a weather system. You need to out, but you need to out.
I got two evil guys right here. And they built no work.
Yeah, if they cut that off,
we got is now.
Hey, did you know that nearly 5.6 million workers are at risk for exposure to bloodborne pathogens?
Yeah, so I work for a school. How dangerous would that be?
True. Healthcare workers have the greatest exposure, but teachers and educational workers deal with a lot of potentially hazardous body fluids as well.
Yeah, sure.
You don't get it, do you? All right. First, you need to know.
What exactly is a bloodborne pathogen?
Bloodborne pathogens are microorganisms that can be present in human blood and can cause disease. These pathogens include those that cause malaria, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and human immunodeficiency virus, the virus that causes AIDS.
All right, it sounds serious. But how am I supposed to come into contact with any of that? And let's say it happens. What am I supposed to do?
Don't worry. There are safeguards you can use to protect yourself against the health hazards from exposure to blood and other potentially infectious material. If you just follow some basic guidelines, not only can you avoid hepatitis B, but you can also significantly reduce the risk of contracting AIDS, hepatitis C, or other bloodborne diseases. Thanks to modern science, it is possible to prevent cases of hepatitis B. This can be done through a simple vaccination.
Get to the point. How does this exposure occur?
The most common way, besides unprotected sex, is through a contaminated needle stick. Chances are there are students in your school with diabetes. That insulin needle could be a hazard. But it's not just needles. You can be exposed to a bloodborne pathogen from any contaminated sharp object, broken glass, scalpels, or even pens and pencils. You also risk exposure through any contact with your mucous membranes, such as the eye, nose, or mouth. If you touch a contaminated surface, a bloodborne pathogen could enter your body simply by rubbing your eye or touching your nose, something you don't even think about.
Whoa, wait a second. What exactly can I be contaminated by? And what is this other potentially infectious material?
Other potentially infectious material includes mostly body fluids such as semen and vaginal secretions, but also internal fluids like spinal fluid or any body fluid that is visibly contaminated with blood. Besides that, there are extreme things like tissue and organ cultures containing HIV or hepatitis. You're most likely to find these in a medical setting though. Body substances like urine, stool, nasal secretions, or vomit aren't considered dangerous unless they have visible signs of blood.
The key to protecting yourself is having a plan.
The first thing to remember in protecting yourself against bloodborne pathogens is to use what the Centers for Disease Control calls standard precautions. Treat all human blood and other potentially infectious material as if they are infectious. That means all of them. I know you work in a school and I know you love your students. All right, well, most of them anyway. The point is, you have no way of knowing if any of them might already be infected.
There's no concentration. It's not big. You guys see what happened? Get your thing up. You guys are going to play, okay? I want you to sit right here. You okay? You're going to paper towels and clean it up, okay?
In any situation where there's a potential for contact with blood, the following precautions should be taken. Whoa, wait. Always use personal protective equipment, or PPE. This is specialized clothing or equipment that should be provided to you by your employer for protection against infectious materials.
Whoa, that sounds serious. What does PPE look like? Plastic gloves? That's it?
Well, personal protective equipment can range from anything from gowns to face shields. In this case, yeah, gloves. The point is, PPE is simple to use, and it could save your life. Always always wear gloves when you even think that there may be hand contact with blood or other potentially infectious material. Remember to replace gloves if they become torn or punctured. If you can't find gloves, make sure you find a barrier. Even a trash bag will do. You can use utility gloves that can be washed and decontaminated for reuse, but they should be discarded immediately if they show any signs of cracking, peeling, tearing, puncturing, or deterioration. The key to removing your gloves is dirty to dirty, clean to clean. This means contaminated surfaces only touch other contaminated surfaces. Your bare hand, which is clean, only touches clean areas inside the other glove. Here, let's take a look. Take hold of the first glove at the wrist, fold it over and peel it back, turning it inside out as it goes. Once the glove is off, hold it with your gloved hand. To remove the other glove, place your bare fingers inside the cuff without touching the outside of the glove. Peel the glove off from the inside, again turning it inside out as it goes, and use it to wrap up the other glove.
Got it.
Remember to immediately remove your PPE and dispose of it properly, especially if it's become contaminated. And do it before leaving the area. Don't risk spreading the exposure. Whoa, wait a second.
What?
You can't just throw sharps into the same receptacle.
Sharps.
Any sharp object has a potential danger to cause injury, and they're even more dangerous if they're already contaminated. Broken glass, scalpels, diabetic syringes, or even pens and pencils could become a contaminated exposure risk. Engineering controls like a sharps container will keep them isolated and prevent further injury.
So where am I supposed to put this?
Contaminated sharps should be discarded immediately in containers that are closable, puncture-resistant, labeled, or color-coded, as well as leak-proof on the sides and bottom.
Work practice controls are actions that reduce the likelihood of exposure by changing the way a task is performed.
It's as simple as this. Never pick up contaminated broken glass by hand. Always use mechanical means such as a brush and dustpan. Just think and be careful. Don't push down overflowing garbage into trash cans. You never know if there's a contaminated sharp waiting to cut you. When you carry a bag of trash, always hold it away from your body to avoid getting punctured in the legs. Good job.
Oh, me? Thank you.
If any surface or object has been contaminated, it must be cleaned with an appropriate disinfectant, such as a diluted bleach solution.
Anything else?
It may sound simple, but basic hand washing remains a fundamental element of infection control, especially since gloves may not provide complete protection against bloodborne pathogens.
I think I know how to wash my hands.
A little technique never hurt anyone. First, wet your hands and apply liquid or clean bar soap. Next, rub your hands vigorously together and scrub all surfaces. It's important to continue for 10 to 15 seconds. Some people find it helpful to hum a little tune to themselves, like Happy Birthday. It is the soap combined with the scrubbing action that helps dislodge and remove any pathogens. Then just rinse well and dry your hands.
I never knew you had to scrub for that long. I thought just a few seconds was fine.
I'm afraid not. Just remember, whenever you come in contact with blood or other potentially infectious material, always wear gloves and always wash your hands as soon as you remove them.
Got it.
Now that you've heard all you can do to protect yourself from exposure, what do you do if an exposure actually occurs? First, don't panic. Most exposures do not result in disease transmission. But be safe and wash the exposed area with soap and water. If blood or other potentially infectious material has been splashed onto your face or any open cut or abrasion, flush the exposed area with water. If any contaminated substance gets in your eyes, irrigate your eyes with water or saline. Then report the exposure. It's important for your school to keep accurate records of any occurrence. You should see a doctor as soon as possible after an exposure, preferably within 24 hours and no later than 7 days. You have to assume that any blood could actually be infectious. Now that you're aware of the dangers of bloodborne pathogens, you know how important it is to reduce your risk of exposure. It's unfortunate that you have to be aware of hepatitis and HIV in schools. However, the recommendations you've been given are really quite simple in comparison to how dangerous the contamination can be. Using precautions consistently, even when it seems unnecessary, and following the proper steps after the exposure could save your life, or the life of another educator, or another child. It's up to you.
So the main thing from the video that I would like you to take away from this is that hand washing is the key to protect yourself. Good hand washing, soap water, the warm water, and doing that as soon as you can. You don't have a sink on your bus, obviously, so you can use the hand sanitizer, but don't just rely on that completely. So you want to use that as quickly as possible, and then wash your hands with soap and water as soon as you can. Always use a barrier, and I know in the real world, it's easy to say always put on gloves. In the real world, you're on a bus, you're driving, there's whatever happens, there's a student in front of you with blood or feet, so you just react. So I want you just to kind of stay calm when anything happens for one thing, and then you can think through the process. If you don't have gloves available, grab a trash bag, something to be a barrier between you and whatever it is that you're going to be exposed to. So if you do have gloves, they always review. If you do have gloves and you have something soiled in this hand, you take it from behind and pull it out, and then it just all goes in that hand, and then everything's contained. This can then go in the trash can, but then you need to tie that trash liner up so that this isn't exposed. Because you get in the trash, and people dig in trash, they drop something, they don't even think about what could be in there. So you always want to make sure that if there's something soiled in the trash, that you remove it. Is there any questions you have about the bloodborne pathogens? No? You all were given a test. I do want to make sure that everyone sign in on the sign-in sheet so you can have credit for this. No? Okay. I'm going to pass it back around. Make sure to sign it. And everybody has a test with you. Just going to go over the answers very quickly. 1 and 2 are false. 3, 4, and 5 are true. 6 and 7 are false. 8 is true. 9 is false. And 10 is true. What this test is just about self-awareness and just kind of gets you to think a little bit about what you saw in the video. The other things that I want to go over with you real quickly is in the school district we have students who have chronic illnesses, and because of that you just need to be aware that we do have many children who have asthma, that have allergic reactions, have seizures, and have diabetes. And those students should have a plan of care or a plan of action that we follow if they were to have any problems at school or even on the bus or any extracurricular activities. And so just be aware that a student who has asthma, you need to be careful with the kind of cleaners that you use, anything that might cause the air to be an irritant to their system. And so you may notice on a hot day if the windows are down or when everyone else is having allergies, you may have a student who frequently coughs or is trying to clear their throat. That could be a sign that they may have asthma. You may be aware that the students on your bus have asthma, and if they ever have an issue, just remain calm and try to help them to remain calm to get them to focus on breathing carefully. Yes, sir?
I got a
They're passing around. Some of our students carry inhalers. An inhaler, an EpiPen, or the glucagon are the emergency medicines that are used for some of the chronic illnesses. And so students who carry those, by law, they have to have the right to carry their meds if they need them. So if you happen to see a student on your bus who has an inhaler, and if you ever see them using it, that's what it's for. But if you ever see them misusing it, let me know so that I can be sure to visit with that student and their parents. I don't know if you see that happen, but I have seen it happen here on the playground. So one of the things that we have to remember is all of our students who take medications in the schools have to have a written consent form, and we generally keep their medicines locked up in the office, and there are trained personnel who help the students with their medicines. Occasionally, more than occasionally, parents just give their students medicines and say, take this if you have a headache, or here's this. And sometimes we don't even know they have the medicine on them. And so if there's ever an issue with medications, just get with me and bring it to my attention so that I can address that with the students. We do that for safety measures for our students and for other students who could be exposed. So it was brought to my attention at an in-service a couple days ago that in the recent past we had a student who gave another student his inhaler and he used it. And inhalers cause your heart to race, they cause you to feel really weird, and this kid did feel weird. And it was really scary for him, but it was scary for the staff because they didn't know that he had taken this other child's inhaler. And so a situation like that, if you ever see anything on your bus, just let me know, and I would love to visit with the student and make sure that they are responsible for their inhaler and that we do a self-contract with that student. So with asthma, it is very common. We have lots and lots of inhalers. There are a lot of them in the office. There's a lot of students that carry them, and it's brought to my attention. Sometimes we didn't even know they had them. So it may be something that you see. With allergic reaction, we do have students we have lots of allergies in the school system. Strawberries, bananas, peanuts, milk. I mean, there's a lot of different things that students can be allergic to. Some of those students carry an EpiPen. It's real important that we know who has EpiPen so that we can use them accordingly and help the student out. An anaphylactic reaction is one that can occur very quickly. So if you would ever see a student for an anaphylactic reaction, we always call 911 and get emergency help there as quickly as possible. Sometimes if they have an EpiPen, the EpiPens, we have trained staff here for the EpiPens, but also, as you may see a student with one that has to use it, you always have to call an ambulance with an EpiPen. It's the main thing to remember there. As far as seizures, we do have a lot of seizure activity that has been reported to me. There are several students who have a seizure disorder, and that can look different ways. Sometimes it can just be a silent seizure. Sometimes you'll see them in convulsions. And the main thing with a seizure to remember is to remain calm and keep the students safe. There's really not anything. There are some medications that can be used, and they are only used if a seizure lasts greater than 5 minutes. Most don't. Most are very brief episodes, and so those students should have some kind of emergency plan for the school to follow. And then the other thing is with diabetes, we do have probably about 8 or so students within our district who have diabetes, and so they carry their kit with them. And so a student with diabetes needs to be able to have access to snacks and water. And so that may be one of the things that if you have a student who rides your bus, they may need to have that access. So that's the main thing. They need to be able to treat their symptoms, and they do that with water or a carb snack. And so those are just kind of a quick review. I usually show the little video, and it just kind of covers each of those things, but I wanted just to bring it to your attention. So the video kind of causes some confusion sometimes. And so is there any questions or any experience you've had with any chronic illnesses that you would like for me to address while we're here? Yes,
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
I haven't had that experience on a bus.
Uh-huh.
Okay, hypothetically, have a student on my bus, don't know that the student has allergies,
Right,
but they show signs of a seizure and needing an EpiPen that they don't have, besides calling 911. Is there any procedure that we can do, you know, not to freak out, but
well, actually, the main thing is, are all of you CPR certified? Okay, with the CPR, they're doing first aid training along with the CPR, so if you didn't have that last time, you'll get that as you renew it. The main thing to know is we have to remain calm in all situations. A lot of times, a student who needs an EpiPen, we should know the ones who need an EpiPen and have an EpiPen. They have to have their own, it has to be ordered by their doctor, and we have to have a consent for them to have an EpiPen. There's not all that many within our district. There are a lot of kids who have allergies otherwise that either don't have an EpiPen, they haven't bought the EpiPen, or they've never been ordered an EpiPen. So you would never use an EpiPen unless that student had one and we knew they were gonna need it.
okay, one other question. On our afternoon routes, when we're getting these children home, no one's at the school. Would our supervisor have that information of what these children are allergic to, or so that they can even get the information to the emergency test?
Exactly. They should have, and that is right. There is not, the procedure has not been there, so we're still trying to work on that communication thing, but we have a FERPA law that has to be followed as well. So you only share information on a need-to-know basis. The students, what I always encourage the parents to do, so the students who I work with who have diabetes, I encourage their parent, if they ride a bus, be sure to communicate with the bus driver. And we communicate with the secretaries as well, so that that student has their supplies when they get on the bus. Anytime that you are in a situation where you feel a child is at risk and it is an emergency situation, the best thing you can do is get emergency help on the way as quickly as possible. So what I would like to see, and what I think needs to happen, is that, yes, if we're aware they have an issue, then I would like for their bus driver to be aware they have an issue. And so we're working on that process. It's, across the state, it's not really smooth from other school nurses that I've talked to. That communication, it gets lost somewhere, and for the kids' safety, it really needs to be there. So, if you ever have any concerns, there have been several reports that I've followed up on where students have presented with symptoms on the bus, and it is you that notices that, and you're bringing it to the attention of the school, and I'm able to follow up on this side of things. So, anything that you notice with a student where you think, we had one student who threw up on the bus every time they got on the bus, they were throwing at. I followed up with that student to see what the issue was, because I didn't know, do they have diabetes? Are they hypoglycemic? Is it the fumes of the bus? You don't know what it is. Is it just car sickness? And so anything that you notice with a student that has to do with their health, feel free to bring it to my attention, and I would be glad to follow up with the parents. And a lot of times that's how I find out our students have chronic illnesses, is because someone reports it to me, and then I call mom, and she's like, yeah, this has been going on for years. Well, we would like to know that to keep your students safe.
If a child's taking medication, does the parent need to go to their doctor and get a paper?
All children within our policy is that we have to have, the law is you have to have a written authorization. Our policy supports that here at the school. Like I said, it doesn't always happen. So when I find that it's not happening, we just need to educate and get the parents on board and get the students on board. And we do that not only to protect that student, but the other students within the school that could be exposed to medicine that's being carried without the proper forms. They do have to give written consent, and they do have to get, they have to bring their medicine in the original bottle. It has to have their name, the doctor, everything on that prescription bottle, and we keep the record of that in the office. So,
The school has their own form, I think that's what she said.
yes, there is a
The school
form.
you have to use the school form.
There is a medication authorization form, and we encourage them to use that form. Inevitably, there will be a parent write a handwritten note that says, my student is taking, they write everything you need and they sign it. Well, it's a written authorization for the meds, but then I try to get them the proper form, because that form also covers the doctor's order, and it also covers the disposal of the medicine at the end of the school year. Anything else? Well, I thank you for your time. Did everyone get their test? And I'm gonna have you turn that in to me. Make sure you did sign that sheet. And if you guys have any questions throughout the year, please be sure to get a hold of me. My office is here at Yes. I do cover, the Guthrie district, and I also cover Foyle, so I'm between the. And thank you guys for your time this morning.
Hey, everybody know Angie? Angie Stanley, she is now the new Director of Special Education, that's it, right? And, she's here to talk to you guys about de-escalation tips?
Yes.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank
Right.
you. First, I just want to say thank you for the job that you guys do. There is no way that I could ever drive a bus, especially after school or after a holiday, before a holiday, things like that. I have not driven a bus. I have only ridden on a bus as a student and as a parent volunteer going on a field trip. So I know that it's completely different from what you do on a daily basis. I'm not here to tell you what to do or be a know-it-all, but just try to open the door for communication as much as anything, especially with us. Discipline on the bus for everybody I know. All students is an issue, but for our kiddos that are on an IEP, where we come in, we get into bus suspensions. A lot of the time then they go to special transportation. I know we've had to add a route this year. I've heard about that, believe me. So we're looking at our numbers to see who we can move back over to a regular bus. But in talking to Cody, don't take my picture.
Too late.
I think we've missed a lot of opportunities to visit with you guys as far as our IEP team and the teachers and myself and whoever we need to get involved, of trying to come up with some strategies that are acceptable and doable on the bus to keep those kids on the regular ed bus, that in turn will help hopefully with behavior, with our numbers everywhere, and the trickle-down effect like that. So that's kind of why I'm here today. I am visiting with the ladies. It sounds like a lot of you guys have some of your behavior things going on, which is great. You know, one of the number one things they talk about is posting your rules, going over your rules. Don't assume that the kids understand what you're saying. And I don't know, I think Cody talks to the teachers at the buildings and stuff eventually, but I think that's something we need to really work on reinforcing in the classrooms as well, is making sure across the board that they understand and know what it is. You just don't make the assumption. You got to break it down for a lot of kids a whole lot more than you think you should have to, but that's just how it is. We also, in visiting with them, it sounds like you guys are using some of the rewards. Who all uses music on your bus? That was something I asked. He said that there's some of y'all have radios and things like that. Do you find that helps? Does it help? Do you use it more as kind of, do you use it more as like a reward, or do you use it to keep quiet, calm, drown out the noise? That's what I wonder. Okay, very good. Good. Keeps them occupied, yeah. So something too that you guys probably already know, kids are more likely to respond to you when they have a relationship with you, when they feel like you're interested in them, invested in them. I know, I was asking Shelley how many kids you guys cram on a bus, and my guess was 50. She said it's closer to 60 or more. So I know that's a lot of names to learn, a lot of, things to remember about kids. But just taking time to make eye contact with them, say hi in the morning, give them a high five, fist bump, whatever, even if it's just a group of students. That just interaction, a lot of the time sets the tone for the whole day. And you guys are the first face they see. School, in their mind, begins when they get on the bus and ends when they get off the bus in the afternoon. So you kind of book in their day. So you get probably the best and worst of them a lot of the times. So just trying to set that tone, trying to build a rapport, a relationship with them, so that when you do have to discipline, hopefully that, you lay the foundation of having a relationship with them. Something I wanted to hit just real quick, because you're gonna get into them, and you probably have stories that would impress everybody about power struggles. There are some kids that we know live on arguing. They feed off of it. They love to argue. We have the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder, ODD, and that is the foundation of challenging authority. Again, I know you've got a whole bus load of kids, your back's to them, you're looking in the mirror, things like that, but the time that you have to stop the bus or interact specifically with one student, I would just encourage you to try to remain calm when they're pushing your buttons, because as soon as they see you react, you've just shown the other busload of kids your main button. And we all have those kids that just sometimes are hard to get along with, the personality clash and things like that. It's going to happen. But some of the areas that I know you're going to hear of them saying, well, Mr. So-and-so last year didn't make us sit down. Well, or they start acting up, trying to save face, look cool in front of their kids, or in front of their other peers and friends. This is stupid. We shouldn't have to do that. But some of the things you may want to try to use, they're called diffusers. Short, simple responses that are neutral. You can't be sarcastic when you're trying to diffuse the situation. And some of the short phrases that, there's a list that, when they're, this is stupid, instead of, I always call it going into yip mode, and we all have, and I'm guilty with this, especially with my own kids. What are you doing? I told you 50 times to sit down. Why are you going to do that? How many times did I do that? That doesn't work. Short, simple, calm. Say what you need to say. Give them a chance to comply with the request. And so some of the diffusers that they suggest you try to use, good to know. Again, not sarcastic. I understand. Probably so. Thank you for your observation. I like that one. I use that one with my own kids. Thank you for your observation. And so that acknowledges them, and sometimes just wait time too. You've asked them to do something, and this is hard because 5 seconds feels like 50. But we do have kids that genuinely have some processing disorders. It takes them longer to hear what you're saying, let it click, and then do it. But then you have some that are just being toots. We know that. So, but just give them some wait time, remain calm, use some diffusers. Like I said, I have no, I'm not going to stand up here and think that I have the magic answer. If I had the magic answer, I wouldn't be here. I would have sold it, retired somewhere. But again, we want to include you guys a lot more with our kiddos on IEPs. I think in April and May, I didn't go back and count, but we had a lot of bus suspensions that we just eventually, after the second or third time, we moved them over to a special transportation bus, and that's catching up with us with our routes. So I think that's something. And the times I would talk to the teacher, they'd say, well, they won't let them listen to music. Well, they won't let them have a snack. Well, the kids said they can't have a book out. Well, we all know the kids aren't going to always be honest and have their own perception of things. But like I said, in visiting with Cody, he said, no, we do want to work with those teachers to try and come up with a plan. I'm not trying to make more work for you guys. I know you got your hands more than full. But just trying to include you in some of our meetings, whether it's by phone, email, sending one of the representatives if you're able to fill them in on what's going on with the kid. But we want to keep them on the bus. We want to keep your sanity. We want to keep everybody safe. But like I said, we just want to work with you guys a little bit more than we have maybe in the past. So if you have any questions for me, I know you guys have a full morning. I said I don't have the magic answers. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
our lovely, our other member of our family, Darko. And he's gonna tell you more about what he does and how they work with the schools. I'll let him finish the rest. This is my other half.
Thank you. For all the new faces, people know me, don't know me, I'm, like I say, Shelley's husband. I work for the sheriff's office. I'm supervisor of the K-9 unit, which we're up and running. We're just fixing to add another dog. I went to Little Rock last week to look at one. Hopefully, we'll be making a selection, and by the end of September, we'll have another dog on the street for our county. And basically what I'm going to do is for those that have never met Darko, I'm going to bring him in. He's very sociable German Shepherd. Used him last night on a search warrant we did. Located multiple drugs, stolen guns, stolen weapons, covered a stolen vehicle they had hid. We did all that through, made a drug arrest the day before at a residence. The next day, they were stupid enough to advertise that they were back up online and selling. We paid them another visit. So we had 2 drug arrests in one day out of the same house. And they had a big Police Lives Matter sign right in their front yard. We appreciate criminals that support us. And I've been doing K-9s for 36 years in law enforcement. I retired, stayed on the reserve force, and went to Iraq for 5.5 years, where I was over the bomb dogs for the State Department, Triple Canopy. We averaged between 155, 175 dogs over there. A few were drug dogs, but most of them were bomb dogs. And there's not much difference in the training other than drug dogs learn basically 4 to 5 drugs, where bomb dogs have to know 27, 28 different odors. So there are a lot more to training a bomb dog. But once there's 4 key ingredients that are in all explosives, that no matter what it is, C4, PE3, dynamite, nitroglycerin, whatever, they have the same chemical, where the dogs are trained basically on those 4 main components, and then we stretch them out. Where before they will pass our certification, they have to be able to hit on all 27 of the odors that go into det cord and data sheets and all the other type of explosives that was used over there. So I came back after an injury. Never thought I'd go back to law enforcement again, and lo and behold, the sheriff stopped me and Shelley one day to talk to us, and we went up to see the new jail. I was leaving with the police car and badge, and trying to figure out how he got me back in there. I told him he missed his calling. He should have been a used car salesman. He suckered me and her. When we got home, she was still like, how did that happen? I've been here 8 years now. Darko's been my partner going on 4. He's a 7-year-old Slovakian Shepherd. They're bigger, faster, and less health problems than the West German Shepherd. So most of our dogs are all Eastern Bloc now. We have a Czech Shepherd and a Czech Shepherd Belgian Malinois mixed. He's like grease lightning. He's like a dog with a turbo. And this new one we're getting is a Belgian Malinois. And if I go with this, I've got about 5 I'm looking at. I've narrowed it down to 3, and all of them are really good prospects. The one I really want is kind of been on hold, and we won't know until September 13th if we get him or not. If we don't get him, I've got 2 in standby that are almost as good. He's just about 5, 6 months older and has a little more maturity than the others, but the others are going to be good dogs when they're his age. Basically what I'm going to do today is, y'all see stuff on your bus and is it drugs or is it not drugs? And we do it every day. Especially since the legalization in Colorado, we're being flooded with everything. I saw the guy the other day that had suckers, dozens of suckers in his car. Can't think nothing about it. I got looking at his eyes, and, I mean, he was higher than a kite sucking on the sun. Every one of these suckers, once I started reading the ingredients, were all laced with marijuana oil. So he sucked the sucker and you get high. And it lasts for hours. They ride around sucking these things. They're in gummy bears now. They're in brownies. It's vape oils. We're getting a ton of vape oil coming out of Colorado. These kids on the buses and in school or taking vape breaks, they're not supposed to be smoking. They're out here smoking these vapes that's actually got marijuana in them. This car I got on the interstate had 7 gallons of vape oil. You really like vaping, don't you? And once we got pulled it up, the great thing about the internet makes our job really good now. Is we get something we don't know what it is, take a picture of it, send it to a site, they'll tell us exactly what it is, the contents, how strong it is, and everything. And when I took a picture of this vape oil and sent it to them, it was like out warning. He's got 8 gallons of it. But they're making it in everything now. It's hard to tell that they have candy bars now that are soaked in marijuana oils. They're not so much. Back when I was a kid growing up, we put marijuana in brownies. We put them in cookies. Everything that you could think to cook it in, we did. Well, now they've got where they just bleed the oil out of it, mix the oil in the batter, and we have people that are running around town eating cookies all day, hiring a kite. One thing that people don't realize is Oklahoma is the 4th leading state in the nation for marijuana overdose. I said, oh, marijuana's not harmful. Well, used to when marijuana was only 12, 15% THC. Now it's up in the high 90s. And we have people that are addicted to marijuana. Everybody's like, oh, marijuana won't hurt you. I smoke a little, I can quit whenever I want. And it's actually proven that St. Anthony's is full of people that are addicted to marijuana and can't get off of it. Then marijuana leads to other things. They like that high, so let's try this high. And right now, Oklahoma is 7th in the nation for meth abuse and meth overdose. Meth in Oklahoma is climbing, and the state Senate just did us an outstanding job of throwing the justice system out the window. Everybody voted for 780, 781. They wanted to make marijuana a misdemeanor. Marijuana was a misdemeanor. It's always been a misdemeanor. But they didn't put it out there. They put it out where it would change it. What that law did was it made methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, hash, misdemeanors. It raised the limit on property crimes, where before if I broke into your house and took a TV, it was a felony. Now they can steal your TV, they can steal your gun, and they can take your computer, and it's still a misdemeanor because of this new law. If you took something to the pawn shop and sold it, it was a felony. that that law is totally gone now. If I steal your iPhone 7, run down here, sign a declaration that I've owned this phone for a year, local police run a check through all the pawn shops are what we call lines on lead now. When something gets stolen, we can go this line, enter what it is, or this side, enter what it is, and it'll show us pawn shops that have it. It'll give us the name of the person that turned it in. This is basically a waste of time now, because it's no longer a felony to sell somebody's stolen property. I can knock the wind out of your 2016 pickup out here. It's gonna cost you $800 to get a window put in it. I can steal your gun, your computer, your phone, your video camera, whatever it is, it's all a misdemeanor now. And they're trying to make burglary not even an offense anymore. If I break into your house, well, we gotta help the drug addicts, is what it's all. We got too many people in jail for drugs in Oklahoma. Drugs is not a victim crime. Well, bull crap. How do they get their drugs? They steal our property. They steal our cars. They break into our houses. Well, this is what this new law has done for us. It basically, I got a list Monday from the district attorney's office that had about 11 offenses that used to be felonies that are no longer prosecutable. We won't even file the charges because of this new bill. It affects all of us people, every one of us that has a house, every one of us that has a vehicle. This law to get people into drug treatment. They don't even have the funds to do, so each county has to pay for this law that the state passed. We're already overextended. Look what they did to us in Guthrie with this lawsuit on Bruni. Every one of us is going to have to pay for that because the city council did not settle it. It went on. If you agree with it or not, one way or the other, the city had the chance to settle it. They took it to different court, and then paid the $750,000 bond at the Supreme Court that was non-refundable and lost it. And so now we're all going to pay because we had a hard-headed city council. And the guy's back, and we got to pay his salary if you agreed with it or not. And we're all going to get our taxes raised. Everybody that lives in the city limits because of our city council. But this is like that money that the citizens put into our city and county. Now this law that says we will treat these drug offenders through drug court and everything else, but we don't have the money to pay for it, so it falls on the county. So that means every member of Logan County has to pay for our drug court. And these guys go up, get busted for meth, drugs, whatever it is, test positive on a P-test, they get slapped and arrested, come back 30 days for another P-test, be clean. 30 days to come back, they're hot again. Go home for 30 days. They can do that up to 5 times before they'll take them back to court. Every time, that's money out of our pocket to make this guy go through treatment, to make him do what he's supposed to do. And it's an epidemic, and our lawmakers, probably within the next 5-7 years, marijuana is going to be legal in the state of Oklahoma, unfortunately. To me, I don't care one way or the other. I don't drink, I don't smoke. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. What matters to me is decriminalize the hard drugs. Marijuana, good or bad, everybody's got a friend or family member that does it. Every one of us. And there's a difference between buying some marijuana, going to your house, smoking it, being the person that's going to Colorado and buying 80 pounds at a time, coming back and selling. That's the guy I care less what you do in your home with your little bag of marijuana. That's not my job. My job is to get the guy that's selling it, bringing it in, transporting it. Now, Darko is one of the tools I use in interdiction. I've been doing drug interdiction on the highway since 1986. I've got anywhere from a quarter pound to my largest load was 1,877 pounds. And I've got 35 loads over 1,500 pounds. And most of my loads that I got ranged anywhere from 22 to 200 pounds. Because that's the most they could stuff in a car, drive across the border without getting caught. And they say that 1 out of every 10 cars coming across the border of Mexico had illegal drugs in it. Another 1 out of every 5 cars was getting picked off by local enforcement. So that means 8 out of every 10 deliveries coming across the border was making it to wherever they were going with their drugs and selling. And now we've got meth coming across the border. But what's really hurting us is marijuana in Colorado. Colorado is growing this stuff in warehouses year-long, climate control. I got a guy with 88 pounds, and I asked him, where'd you get your drugs from? He said, Colorado. I said, how did you get 88 pounds in Colorado? They can legally sell a ½ ounce to somebody that lives in Colorado, a quarter ounce if you're not a resident of Colorado. I said, you can only buy a quarter ounce at a time legally in Colorado. How did you get 88 pounds? He said, well, I'd go to head shop. And they asked me how much you want. And I said, can I get 5 pounds? And they said, yeah. They'd slide it across, sell me 5 pounds. He said, I'd go to the next shop. Can I get 10 pounds? Some would say, well, no, we can't sell you 10 pounds. We can sell you 5. So he'd buy 5 more. And he said, I thought I could only get a quarter. He said, well, I can help. Half the people in every store they go in, we had a deputy just went up there last week for a honeymoon. Never been to his head shop, so we went in to look at him. He said everybody in there working was smoking dope and hiring a kite. He said, they didn't care. They asked him how much he wanted. And he said, can I get a ton? And they said, you got a truck? He said, I'll be back. This was a job. But this guy that I got out here, he said that he found 2 shops that would sell him up to 8 pounds, but he can buy 5 pounds. So that's where he got the 8 off the offset of 88. Because everybody else would sell him 5 pounds at a time. He started asking 5 pounds and he'd get it, so he thought, well, I'll jump for 10. And he asked for 10, and they all pretty well said no, 5 pounds was the max. So if you got money and you want to go last year for the whole year, you know, there's several places in Colorado, they'll give you 5 pounds at a time. And unfortunately, with this new law, that used to be a felony in Oklahoma. Now it's a misdemeanor. If you have less than 25 pounds on you, it's a misdemeanor in the state of Oklahoma now. So, used to that was trafficking, it was a felony.
I have a question. Okay, let me calm down. How is that a misdemeanor, especially that much you know they intend to sell it?
Go to the state capitol and ask them.
I mean, any idiot knows that.
We know that.
But, okay, I'll rest my case. The state capitol, no idiots up there, okay.
But unfortunately, that's what we tried to discuss with them, is if you get somebody with 7 pounds of methamphetamine, how's that, you know, used to, if you had a ½ pound, it was a felony. And now you get these people on interstate with anywhere from 7, 11, 15 pounds, and it's a misdemeanor.
Being that I'm there all summer in Colorado, of course. They do have laws up there on how much, you can still get busted for grabbing too much pot up there too.
Yeah, that's what I said, they can legally buy a half, ounce.
Yeah.
But,
But you get caught with it,
and see, I've stopped 3 or 4 people on I-35 going south, you know. Colorado license plates have kind of stuck in my mind here lately. And, I catch you on I-35 or coming into Guthrie to get gas, because I get behind you on the interstate, you're doing like 42 miles an hour. It's kind of a deal that, you know, your faculty might be just a little low on air or oxygen. But everybody I get, they're coming through the state with a half ounce of marijuana on it. It's legal in California or Colorado, and I tell everyone, not Colorado no more, Toto. They have to think about that for a while. You know.
How is, on the cookies, suckers, how is it inserted into lace, how is that inserted into candies?
Well, the old way to do it is you get a coffee grinder, put your marijuana in, you grind it up really good, and then you mix it in your batter, and then you cook it. Well, now with the oil, it's, heck, you don't need a coffee grinder no more. You just buy a bottle of marijuana oil, pour that oil in there, and mix it in, and boom, you got some dynamite brownies. You're gonna stay home for a couple hours.
This is only the one who uses it. How would I know if I have a lace?
Oh, you're gonna know real fast. Because nowadays it's really fast.
I've heard of all this stuff, and candies and stuff, and cookies. And I was wondering, so since marijuana is leafy, and you said they grinded it up, how did they do it?
Yeah, they ground it up to where it looks like powder now, and you mix that powder in, and a lot of people are making their own base, and they'll grind it up, and it gets real powdery. They'll put it in a coffee filter, and then they'll run warm water over that marijuana, and it'll drip the oil out of that marijuana. Then they'll squeeze it out, then they'll heat that water up, and the oil will raise to the top, and they'll scoop that oil out, and that's how they get their marijuana.
So you saying this is just regular?
Yeah, it's all on the internet.
The reason she's asking is in case she would come across it and she would accidentally get a hold of it.
These suckers.
Can you smell it?
No.
She wants to know if she would accidentally
No.
get it.
Not like it used to be.
Is there a difference?
By looking at it, the girl will not be able to tell.
You're not gonna know until an infection is well, right? That one
Yeah,
bite.
you're gonna start feeling just kind of good. You're gonna start looking for the Dorito bag.
But I want to know if I would see one, would I mean,
No, you would not. The suckers come in all different shapes. The big popular one, it looks like a golf ball. It's round and they're clear, different colors. This guy had red, blue, pink, green, and they dip them in different flavors to, you know, so it's a flavored sucker. And the guy told me, he said, you don't eat them. He said, suck them. If you eat them, he said, you're going to go to the hospital.
there is persons in gummy bears, and they'll buy that themselves and they.
Yeah, they're just gummy bears in a clear plastic bag that look like gummy bears you buy at Love's or anywhere else.
But only the people that purchase that, saying that,
So,
the ones that out on the streets. So I don't want that, but I want to know to recognize the stuff.
yeah, it's the way to do it the best way to do that is just get on the internet and put in there marijuana candies. Boy, it'll
Or
tell
the
me a
dozen
while.
cost $30 for
But
one.
see, where we can't smell the oils and the candies, like, you can the marijuana itself, the dogs will still hit on it, because they hit on the oils and the odor from the THC. They can't hide that odor totally, and the more gummy bears, the bigger, and people think that, I have people that mask their cars with coffee and Bounce and Febreze and everything to try to cover the odor of marijuana. It does. A dog is so different. Their nose is 200 to 400 times stronger than ours. Where when you go into the kitchen, Shelley's cooking stew. I'm in the living room and I'm, oh, that smells good. I go in there and I smell it. Can't believe it's done. Well, to a dog identifies each odor in that pot. They'll smell the tomato soup, they'll smell the noodles, they'll smell the corn, they'll smell the green beans, the meat. And so we know that dogs can select 7 odors at a sniff.
Wow.
So where our nose tells us, oh God, that smells good, the dog's going, oh man, I'm gonna put this in it. I hope she knows that that's gonna go really good on my kibbles and bits.
And yes, he is spoiled.
And our dogs get a little spoiled. We get a lot of table scraps, which are not supposed to, but we do it anyway. I mean, I look at it like this. I would not want chicken nuggets every day for my entire life.
Right.
And,
Right.
and people feed their dog food today. Don't give them people food. Hell, why not? They eat dead crap in the yard all day. Why not give them table scraps? It's healthy. And, yeah. I mean, I guarantee you, my dog kills a squirrel, we're gonna for 3 days because he's got the worst breath in the world.
Yes.
And he wants to come up and lick you and let you know, look what I caught. What I did is I put a couple things out, just small stuff, that when we train these dogs, we train where I'll take a toothpick and I'll put it in a bag of marijuana. And I'll take that toothpick out and I'll stick it somewhere in a car or on a car. And we work these dogs' nose where they will find that toothpick, just the odor. So I've actually had dogs. I had a dog named Ranger that was just my second best dog. He was my first dog. Probably would have been a better dog, but I didn't do highway interdiction with him that much. But Ranger, I did highway interdiction with him. Is I could get with Ranger, turn my vents on in my police car, drive down the interstate, and when I would come up by a car that had a load of dope, he'd stand up, start spinning around, and wagging his tail. And that was, so then it was like, okay. I'd back up, I'd move over, I'd sit down, I'd pull up, I'd move over. And Dad, I told you it's up here, just look. I'd drive a little bit farther and he'd come up and start wagging. Well, then I had to find a reason to stop the car. I knew for my dog there's dope in that car, but the state of Oklahoma says I can't pull you over unless I have a reason. Well, most people in here don't realize there's 1,484 traffic laws in the state of Oklahoma. I can get real creative when I would usually find, but I had 7 traffic stops on vehicles that was transporting anywhere from 50 to 300 pounds of marijuana, just because of the way he started acting when I got in. when you're going down the road, everybody knows what a cone looks like. This vehicle's meeting this, the wind's coming around the car. Marijuana is always leaking an odor. Meth is always leaking an odor. Cocaine's always leaking. That wind pulls that odor out. And it's like human odor when we track. That odor spreads. Well, when we get into that cone, this car may be up here, I may be 6, 7 cars back. When the dog gets a scent and starts, hey, whoop, something's got my attention, Dad. And as we move into the cone and get closer, the cone gets smaller and smaller and smaller till I get up behind the vehicle. And then the dog's like, that's it, Dad. You're behind him. Well, then I have to come to reason stop. Well, the Supreme Court has ruled that that is totally legal now. That if you have a dog that's trained on, a dog that you can prove that does that, then you can make a traffic stop without probable cause or reasonable suspicion that we have to have. Texas has defined it so well that they have actually put a ram air system on their trooper cars that collects air, comes in, goes through a circulation fan in the dog kennel, and when it hits, that dog starts doing its spinning and turning and barking. It's stood up in the Supreme Court that it's a total legal stop without violation of the law. So, but I've got 7 stops with Ranger off the interstate from him just getting up back.
Now, isn't that like a catch-22? You out there doing all this work, and then when you bust them, they let them go because it's still a misdemeanor? That's crazy. And a lot of people voted. Okay. A lot of people voted for that 881 thing, and I'm almost certain that they didn't pay attention to the wording.
They didn't.
Because the way that they word these propositions, just like the right to work, people thought that that was giving them a right to work, when it was just cutting out a lot of things for, you know, the worker. Like, nobody wants to be part of a union, but there are unions that already exist, but that's crazy. They're giving you all of this for you to work with, right? And Rin Tin Tin over here worked his heart out. And you out there busting your behind, and we paying taxes, and then it's just like, for what? For nothing.
We're going to let them go. They're going to send it
For
out.
nothing.
We can't find you. We can't put you in jail. Go to drug court.
Now, here's the question, all right? Somebody breaks in my house, all right? Now, you've already explained how that's starting to work, okay? But then, when I protect myself and my property in my house, why do I see and hear people on the news getting charged for protecting themselves and catching a criminal in their house?
That's right.
But then they tell me that it's the make my day law. Okay, see, at home in Chicago, it used to be you shoot them in the yard, you drag them in the house. I don't even know if they still do that there, but now how is that going to work? I'm protecting myself, my
Unfortunately,
family.
the same people that pushed this whole marijuana misdemeanor deal and the citizens of Oklahoma only read 4 sentences out of an 11-page law and voted for it. When something's going to pass, whatever the agenda they're pushing, is read the 3, 4, 8, 15 pages that follow, because there's something hid in there. But the same people that pushed and passed 780 and 781, they're pushing to make my day off the books.
It don't matter, if you leave it on the books, it's not working.
Well, the thing is right now they're saying, well, if burglary's no longer a felony,
Right.
how can you shoot and kill somebody for stealing property that's not a
Oh,
property?
wait, so do I have to put a no trespassing sign in my yard? No, I'm just.
The way I look at it is,
Because if somebody come in my house,
you call me,
y'all will take up a donation.
you call 911 and say, I just shot these 2 guys that broke in my house. I'm gonna come out there, and I'm thinking, yeah, you got them, didn't you?
But that's you.
But, yeah, you wouldn't believe how many of us feel this way. And then we're gonna say, this is the most important question that you can answer. Were you in fear of your life?
Yeah, I'm terrified, shaking my.
Bingo, right there.
Scared me to death.
That makes it all. That's why they keep saying, why'd that officer shoot, or why'd that civilian shoot that unarmed person? That's not right. Well, crap. Only you know fear. I can't tell how much fear you're in. I can't tell how much fear you're in. I can't tell you how much fear I am, but I can explain to you, you know, that he scared the crap out of me. I knew he was gonna hurt me, possibly kill me. I knew that my life was in danger. I knew possibly my children's lives was in danger. I was not gonna be a victim, not today in my house.
Well, don't you need to
That's
have
all
a
you
question
gotta
before
say
you
to
go?
me, and I'm gonna say, DA, I don't see any charges here.
You talk
And
to
you know what's
your-
gonna happen, is our DAs, more than likely, are gonna say, I feel the same way you do. Because it's not our district attorneys are just as upset with this as we are. Their hands are tied. They didn't pass the law. It's the people, right now, our country is so divided. There are people that don't, and especially it depends on where you are, is people don't want people to be able to protect themselves. They don't want people to decide what's right and wrong. They don't want people to decide what's morally right or wrong. And unfortunately, those people are getting the votes. They're getting, because everybody else complains, but nobody shows up to vote. And we get outvoted. And it's just like, you know, you couldn't teach with the Bible here in the school,
Yeah.
but they'll set up a booth and do whatever religion they want. I don't want to start naming religion.
Like they did,
But-
take it
but
off.
they can, because they throw it under history and other stuff.
Right.
Well, I mean, you know, you think of these others, they came out after the Word of God, the Bible, which I probably shouldn't start talking in here. So, but we just have to watch, when they pass laws, you need to read what's in the law. That one thing they're pushing is just part of the agenda. On the second, third, fourth page is what they really want. And nobody gets that.
And you can get access to that, that whole 15 pages you talked about, because I stay on it.
Yeah.
And also find out who wrote the bill,
Yeah.
make sure it doesn't get in the office.
They're the same ones that are pushing
Pushing.
for legalizing
That's really good.
marijuana. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna run out and get Darko right fast. I've got a couple, hides out here, for those that haven't ever met him and seen him. And I'll show him to y'all, and then if everybody wants to kind of turn and face, I put him out on the back wall so it wouldn't interfere with anything. I've got one big deal I'm gonna put in Russell's back pocket.
There you go, there you go.
Is there a first aid kit? There you go. We need a first aid kit because when he takes it out of Russell's pants.
He can have his first bite.
You need to take my picture, did you say today?
That's why I said call an ambulance when they came running.
Like I said, if most of you will just, I mean, you can turn, but just kind of stay where you're at, okay?
Yeah, don't arm around. Don't be moving around. You over there, we'll come get you.
I know we kind of got off subject there, but it's information that obviously you guys wanted to hear. Some of that didn't really pertain to the school and the drugs, but that's okay. We do put up with suckers all the time, you guys know that. You know, kids drink snacks and stuff like that. They start acting funny, they call
need to move them this way. He's fixing to bring that dog in. Oh, okay.
They got a sucker.
They need to come this way.
Leave now. They got a sucker, leave now.
Hey, you guys need to move this way. You need to move this way. He's bringing in a dog.
You need to move that dog away.
He's bringing in a drug dog. Let's go.
Grab the chair.
When he gets done, y'all.
Find a chair and sit down, guys.
Stop spitting it.
Sit down.
You won't get it up. I mean, Jim can call him, recall him, but there's gonna be an accident. And Cameron's been bit, and it leaves, still got a scar. That was an accident. Go sit down, hurry. Excuse me. Cameron wanted to train the dog. Sue said that was terrible.
Yeah.
David, he's coming.
David, he's coming. Be still.
Okay, he's gonna get him a donut. Oh, they want to see the dog. Oh. You need to sit down. Oh my God, he is beautiful.
Donut. We stuff like donuts too. I think that's what a learned habit from me. This is my partner Darko. Like I said, he's been with me 4 years now. He's a Slovakian Shepherd. He's trained in narcotics and patrol. He does handler protection, tracking, building searches, evidence recovery from article searches in the field. People we chase, throw stuff out. He'll go out and find it. We've changed the way. When I got my first dog in the 70s, they didn't even like us, let alone themselves. They were so aggressive and mean. In the 90s, we started going to a more sociable dog. And by now, all these dogs are trained to be very social. Yeah, I know. But these dogs are trained not out of meanness or they're trained out of love. They will do anything for praise in this ball. As you kind of watch him, he's like, I'm going to get this ball. Dad wants me to do something. And so he said, all I got to do is make Daddy happy and I'll get this ball. And that's how we train them. And we don't train them to be mean. If I tell him to do something, he'll do it. If I don't tell him, he won't, unless you attack me. Now, if somebody starts yelling, raising their voice with me, he'll say, I've had enough of this, Dad. And he'll do it on his own. A lot of times people I've wanted to do something to, he'll say, enough's enough, let's do it. So, what I did, like I said, I've got a couple hides out, and I'm going to just kind of show you how he alerts and how I know when he finds drugs. What I got out is I've got a little bit of marijuana out over here, and then over on this wall over here, I've got a mix of of heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines, all in the deal. And when we train these dogs, we used to train them, it took weeks and weeks and weeks. We trained them one drug at a time. They learned that drug, then we trained them on another drug, then we trained them on another drug. It'd take 3-4 months to train these dogs to all the drugs. But what we started doing now is we just throw it all in a pot, and they get awarded for smelling it, and then once they learn to hit on all of it, then we separate it, because they've already got it. It's like I was telling you the stew effect earlier. They've already got the odor from that, and so once we separate it, well, when it was in this, I got the ball, so it's by itself. Let's see what happens. So, and that's it's cut our training time a third, where we can actually have this dog, it's a drug dog only, on the street in about a month instead of 3 months. Learning, back when I first started, our dogs weren't even drug dogs. We found out by finding marijuana and running stuff that, hey, they can smell that marijuana. Then we progressed from there. And so I'm going to run this right fast, just so everybody knows. Is like I said, I've got a find over here, and then I've got a find on that wall over there. Where you get your phone? Yeah, the coast. Where'd it go? Are you sure? I don't think you know what you're talking about.
No, it is right there, I'm pointing at it.
Are you sure? Okay. Give it to me, darn it.
He wants that ball.
Yes, he does. He loves that ball.
Wait, I'm not leaving, I'm not leaving.
Push. Leave it. Push. Leave it. Back. Sydney. I think his ball went over here, so he's actually looking for his ball. He's not looking at me.
Oh, I see. It's right there.
You like it? Are you like it?
I got one Oh, my goodness.
So basically with, here, come Nick. Basically when we get him out and run a car is we make him think we put that ball in the car. Or we make him think we threw it in your living room. And he's going to tear that house apart looking for that ball. And then when he stumbles on the odor, it's going to be, oh, yeah, this means the ball's coming. That's basically how, they work. And like I said, is they find anything from, and people don't realize, a lot of people, that you put a bag of marijuana in your pocket. You go out and you open your car door, hand them that marijuana. It'll stay on your car door up to 3 months.
Wow.
Yep. You sit in the car with that bag in your seat, it'll permeate the odor. It'll last in a car up to 5 months. So people go, we stopped little Johnny out here driving Daddy's car. That's my car. I don't do those. Well, little Johnny must. dog's sitting there, alerted for some reason, and we don't find drugs in every vehicle we search, but I always talk to the people that, you know, my dog wouldn't hit if there's not drugs in this car at some point. You know, you don't have to tell me your friend's name. You got a friend that does dope? Yeah. When was he in your car? Oh, 3 days ago. Had a bag of weed, didn't he, or a bag of meth? Yeah. Of course, we don't tell him how I know he did that. But they all, once we talk to them, and now that they know it's just a misdemeanor, they're really good at routine. You missed me. I had a pound of bumped dope in here yesterday. You missed me. Well, yeah, but I'll be watching for you next week. Well, I hope it was enlightening.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna take like a 15-minute break, okay? I'll let you guys move around now.
Can I play with him? I want to play with him. I know. That's what I want to do. Can I rub him? Yeah. Hello. Oh my God, he just wants to be petted.
Very so.
Hi, babe. Okay. Come on, Darko. Darko, come in. Come in.
Let's go here, away from the camera. What'd you do, girls? Have a knee operation?
And just the sides of it.
I sent pictures to the girls. Casey, she's so mad. Why can't
Hold on.
Don't knock the leash over. How are you doing, Alicia? Come in.
This is Genesis. I'm bringing him over to see Sarah.
He knows. I know, what you get from the dark, I like to know.
I just curious because I was like, it's my bag of medicine sitting next to it. Right. I'm just curious.
We don't trade them.
Right.
What is these colors? I know.
She doesn't like all of them. She likes to
Okay, so I want 16 now. I know they will.
I got the over counter stuff. But if Bella is trying, Claire's like, I didn't know. Tell them with the boys, their friends. And he liked her. Yes, it's simple. Oh, you wanna see it? So is that possible? Trained to. Here. What's his color? A working girl. Oh, you don't have to tell me, I know I got to talk to you. Yeah, get it started. He's my daddy. Okay, yeah. Right, but this is not the point. Don't call me. Darcy's gonna have a fit. Never say the truth. It's been done.
You don't have to have a job to run for it. How do you know? Stop thinking that.
And when I came up to you, yeah, put me your keys.
Whatever. A great day, you're gonna really need a job.
On his hand. He took my keys. He took my keys and threw them out the window.
These are.
You doing all right?
That's probably what it was then.
You handle your.
Okay, you in there finish spinning. You all have to see them.
That's how I pray. That's the way he was. Yeah. Right, right. Yeah. What's your command language? Dutch? Oh, you're Czech, isn't it? Yeah. I get the opposite then. Yeah, he did the same thing. He provided cars. Yeah, it's around and marked and stuff. And to pull them over. He's there. Now that's the other. We'll help Paul Martin out. He is with. Oh my. So you replacing him? That's the one you're looking for?
Oh, he does? Is that who you're getting it for, is Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
He went blind, huh? He is born blind. What are you gonna do with him now? Other family? That's it.
You got your ball? Yeah. Macy and JC are mad. I sent a picture of them and they're like, why is he there? I was like, I get to pet him and they're like,
He's definitely wider than normal. Wider than
yeah.
Tell the dog to lay down, to sit down and block it. Have two wide, eyes and two loose.
Oh, okay. Nope.
Yes, I do, and I almost checked it down the other night. He's waiting at me. One day I got. Ain't nothing in my pocket, buddy. That's all the work comes on. They just started breeding this about 10 years ago. When I got here, over that.
JC makes their mad because he's here and they don't know what to see. Yeah, they play with him so much.
Huh?
Yeah, that's what he's sitting at the table. He wants one. Yeah, he wants one. Can I feed him one? Can I feed him one without the sugar on it? Oh, here, okay. I don't have any Cheetos.
Kevin worked for me in Oklahoma County. He was in the traffic commission. I talked to him in the county jail. When I retired, I left Oklahoma County. I tried to work with Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Major had a bunch of they made that guy canines, and then they made Kevin his assistant. He left there and went to Canadian County. He's been out there for 7 or 8 years. I just saw him the other night where I was doing pipeline security and I released him. He said from an hour and a half.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Reggie. Yeah, I've known Reggie for
Get it?
Yeah.
Good boy.
Yeah? Yeah. Guys, it's him.
It's your turn? There's not anymore. Yeah. My girl is not as big as him, but she's big. Right?
K-9 unit, and they got rid of it. Because it was, we have it, we still, we have a dog 24 hours a day now.
Actually, we don't, we look for options.
No, we have 3 in Bradford. We have a dog in every
Raincoat, and go under it. All right. Yeah, and she said, yeah. That's like Joanna. It's a lot of power. You went for that rain jacket, you'd be so. You got so good. Really? And she got some. Yeah, I love that. See where they go with that boat? They got the rest of the barrier there. Yeah, there's a boat that goes around it. Yeah. Are you kidding me? You can see it? And then another color. Yeah. I love it. But I wouldn't be down there.
I
Society.
I don't help out with nothing else, that's Russell's job. Let's get this party back on track. First of all, I'm gonna need $1 from each of you so I can take him to dinner.
All I got is a 5, so I'm sorry.
It's my day off, and you've got me coming up there, and I said, yeah, because it's that or watch videos all day, and I didn't think you guys wanted to watch videos all day, so. I hope you enjoyed it. I know we kind of got a little off track there, but it's all really good information. I can't answer all of the questions that he can, but if you guys, want some additional information, I'll try to do the best I can. I've been doing this for 25 years or whatever, working with him and the dog. So I try to keep up on what he does. Well, I'll help you if I can. We're gonna watch the pre-trip video that I know you guys have seen, but there are certain things that we had to include in our in-service in order to get credit for it. This is one of them. So we're just gonna do that short little pre-trip video again, then we'll move into some other stuff, okay? Hopefully I can push the right buttons back here. Cody's not answering, technology's not answering. Casey's asking for a password, which I don't have. So, you're gonna have to finish it. You're about every day. Follow the sheet, check everything. Well, it's not right going here. There you go. Go down the list and check everything on the list. There you go. We're done.
Managing student behavior is a challenge, regardless of the setting. But managing scores of children while driving a 13-ton vehicle presents a challenge not everyone can handle successfully. On top of that, there's a rising concern about school violence and the safety of our students and employees. There is hope and movement to turn around the staggering rise of youth violence. As educators, we refuse to feel hopeless, and it's not in our collective or personal nature to feel hopeless. As we learn more strategies in student discipline, we take yet another step in the process to detect and prevent school violence. On February 11, 1988, while working at a Florida high school as an assistant principal, Dr. Nancy Blackwell, a fellow administrator and a teacher, fell victim to two gun-wielding students, which rocked the educational community. After her recovery, she recognized the need to evaluate school districts' training programs and use the knowledge gained through her experience to help other educators. Dr. Blackwelder is an articulate speaker with experience as a teacher and as an assistant principal at both the elementary and high school levels, an assistant director of transportation, and an administrator in the special needs student education department. Tomorrow, we hope that you'll return to your jobs and use the strategies you learned today and feel that powerful sense of assurance that comes when you know you have the tools in place to ensure that your buses and schools are safe and happy havens for everyone.
Hi, my name is Nancy Blackwelder, and as a former teacher, assistant principal, and assistant director in transportation in a large school district with over 100,000 students, it was obvious to me right off the bat that we did a good job of training our drivers in how to drive the bus. But we did precious little on teaching them how to deal with children. And it's no surprise to you, dealing with children is half the battle. So I developed some workshops in managing student behavior. It's important to understand what your job entails. You're not just a school bus driver. You're not just a professional driver. You are carrying our children on your school buses. So it's important that you view yourself not as just a driver, not just somebody who picks up a pack of dogs and gets them from point A to point B and hopes that they behave. But if they don't, we're going to write them up and send them to the principal. And by George, that principal better send them back fixed. If you picture yourself as that's your job, you're going to have some limited success in pupil transportation. But if you view yourself as number one, a professional driver, and number two, an educator, now, you may not be teaching chemistry and physics, but what you teach our children every day, I believe, is way more important than any lesson in chemistry and physics to making them successful adults. What you teach our children every day is social skills. How to keep their hands to themselves, how to wait their turn in line, how to be safe, how to respect the rights of other people. I mean, what more important lessons are there for our children these days? So viewing yourself as number one, a professional driver, and number two, an educator, I believe makes you far less a victim of the rude and obnoxious children, and far less a victim of those supervisors or principals that you may feel don't support you in discipline, and far more a part of the solution. So in today's unit on Managing the Bus Environment, Part 2, here are the topics we're going to go over today. Number one, adaptive versus maladaptive behavior. Some concepts about assertive discipline. We're going to talk about why students misbehave. I'm going to give you 6 myths about student management. The 10 most common behavior management mistakes educators make. I'm going to give you some of the tricks of the trade. 12 actions that can escalate misbehavior. Effective student management, and building your bus community. Let's talk about the whole concept of good kids versus bad kids. Are there bad kids? You know, if you tell a child enough times that they're a bad kid, they will start to believe they are a bad kid, and they will give you bad. There was an interesting study they did in gifted classes where they took 4 teachers and they gave them each a classroom of children, and they told those teachers that they were all gifted children. There was one teacher, however, who got a class of average students, but she didn't know that. So they taught these children all year long, and at the end of the year, all 4 classes behaved as gifted children and performed as gifted children. Sometimes it's our expectations of what our children can give us that dictate how they behave. If we have a preconceived notion that a child is going to be bad, and we tell him he's bad, we might end up with bad behavior. But what I would suggest is that children aren't just good children and bad children. That children are adaptive or maladaptive to your environment. Because we know that not everybody gets along. Some personalities just don't mix. And so just because you have a child that doesn't behave well on your bus, doesn't mean that they may behave just fine on another bus. And it's your environment that they either adapt well to or they adapt poorly to. You remember when you were in junior high school, you had some teachers that you could get away with murder in their class. And you had other teachers that, by George, you better be in your seat when that tardy bell rings, not walking through the door. And you knew what the expectations were of each of those teachers, and you adapted accordingly to how you needed to behave in those environments. Well, that's the same thing the kids are going to be doing on your bus versus somebody else's bus. They may adapt very well to your rules and your expectations, and those kids that adapt well to your rules and expectations, aren't they the good kids? And those kids that don't adapt to your environment and your rules, aren't they the bad kids? So sometimes we have to look at the environment that we create for our children and making that determination about whether we need to change something about that environment so that that child can adapt to our version of normal. Let me give you an example. I had a child next door that was in middle school that lived next door to me, and she approached me one summer because she knew I worked in transportation, and she asked me, was there any way that I could make certain that they had the same bus driver this year that they had last year? I had to explain to her that I couldn't do that, and she was disappointed, and she said, well, is there any way that you can make certain we don't have a lady we had the year before? And I said, what was wrong with her? And she said, oh, she was so mean. And I said, well, what did she do that was so awful? And she said, I don't know, she was just mean. I said, well, what went on the bus? She said, well, we learned early on that if the same person got on her nerves 2 days in a row, that she'd write them up and send them to the principal. So we all got together and we decided that we would take turns. I love that. A busload of middle schoolers taking turns trying to make this woman's life miserable. And I said, well, this woman that you thought was so nice that you wanted as your bus driver, what did she do that was so nice? And she said, I don't know, she was just nice. And I said, well, did you have the conspiracy thing going on her bus? And she said, oh no, we wouldn't do that. She's too nice. And so I really had to look into these two bus drivers and figure out what is the difference? What are they doing that's so different that this group of children would choose to make one driver's life miserable and would choose to make another driver's life pleasant? And I rode the mean lady's bus first. And she was fine, you know, she did all the rules right, drove well, stop arms, kids filed on the bus, went back and sat down, went right into school. She corrected a few when they were standing up, not sitting in their seats properly, whatever. I thought, well, that's not such a bad deal. And then we went and rode the nice lady's bus. And I'll have to tell you, I had some preconceived notions that maybe the kids thought she was so nice because she let them do whatever they wanted to do. But that wasn't the case at all. She had absolute control of her bus. Drove the bus well, stopped arms, the kids filed on the bus, and that's where the entire picture changed. As those kids filed on that bus, she spoke to each one of them, called them by name. I'm not sure she knew everybody's name, but she called a lot of them by name. And she had little comments she'd make, like, are those some new glasses? You go, girl, they look good. Aren't you looking pretty today? How'd you guys do in the ball game the other day? You win? I mean, it's not so hard to figure out who plays ball. They usually wear their game jersey the day of games. Not too hard to figure out who's in the band, carrying their instruments on the bus. She had a little nice comment she made to the kids as they filed on the bus. And it was like a light bulb going off in my head, an epiphany. The reason, when you're looking at it from a kid's point of view, the only thing they heard come out of the mean lady's mouth was corrective action. Sit down, be quiet, turn around in your seats. To a child, that's all very negative. But the nice lady, they heard all these nice comments come out of her mouth, such that when she had to correct them, it wasn't near as hard to take. So the kids adapted to her environment much better because she had those positive comments that she was making, and the only thing the kids heard come out of her mouth was not simply negative comments. So adaptive versus maladaptive. It's the insane person that does the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. Change your environment if you're having problems with children. So I have a lot of drivers who will say, holy crow, how am I supposed to manage student behavior when I'm driving a bus down the street? My job is to keep from running into the guy in front of me. And truly it is. But it's my notion that much of what you do as far as being able to manage student behavior occurs before you ever turn that bus on. It has more to do with the rapport that you have developed with these kids and how much reinforcement density you have provided. You know, you can't just catch them doing it wrong and punish them. You also need to catch them doing it right and reward them. And the greater your reinforcement density is, the number of positive comments for every negative corrective action you have to take, the better off you're going to be as far as discipline goes. And it also has a lot to do with whether you are scanning for the warning signs. It is very evident when kids are frustrated, angry. It's all over their face. It's in their body language. And if you are looking for the warning signs of kids who are frustrated or angry or are having problems, you will have a much better chance of having a good, disciplined bus. So what is your approach? You know, you can't make kids behave. You have to make them want to behave for you. See, that is one of the key concepts of the mean bus driver versus the nice bus driver. The nice bus driver had those kids wanting to behave for her, where the mean bus driver was trying to make them behave for her. So it's a key concept. I'll go over it again. You can't make kids behave. You have to make them want to behave for you. How do you remain objective when you're dealing with children on the bus and they misbehave? You know, a lot of people take it very personally when children misbehave on their bus. But what we really have to understand is that because kids are kids, they get up and every day they have one chore and one chore that they perform every single day. And that is because they're kids. They test their boundaries. Kids are boundary testers, and drivers and assistants are the boundary keepers. Kids test our boundaries. We keep the boundaries. We draw that line in the sand. And we say, if you cross that line, there are going to be consequences for your behavior. The moment we cross that line in the sand, draw that line in the sand, kid looks at that line, steps over it. Really? And if we don't deliver the consequences that we promised, then that's not the line in the sand. The boundary is out there somewhere, and kids will test and test until they hit that wall. And no means no, and it doesn't mean maybe. So if you can keep that kind of objective thought in your head, that's what kids will do. They are the boundary testers. We are the boundary keepers, and not taking it personally when a child misbehaves. So, there are certain things about assertive discipline that work well in classrooms, but really don't work so well on the bus. But there are a few concepts that I'd like to run by you because they do have some value and worth. Number one, there is the non-assertive driver. That driver shows a lack of confidence, lets misbehaviors continue, doesn't know how to stop the misbehaviors, is often frustrated and overwhelmed, and rarely gives students positive feedback. You might hear a non-assertive driver saying, "Can't you kids behave? For the third time, please, won't you sit down? It's so noisy in here, I just can't handle teenagers. I wish these kids would stop making such a racket." Then you have the hostile driver. That driver appears to be out of control, gets mad and yells, calls students names, gets personal, puts them down, is an authoritarian, threatens and doesn't do anything, and harms students psychologically. You might hear a hostile driver saying, "You kids make me sick. Get in your seats and shut up now. If I have to tell you one more time, I'm stopping the bus and throwing all of you out. You kids are a bunch of dummies. Can't any of you behave? You act like you grew up in the zoo." Now there's the assertive driver. An assertive driver appears to be in control, stays calm, uses a normal tone of voice, knows what to do if students misbehave, tells students specifically how they want them to behave. They say what they mean and mean what they say, and they give positive feedback to students who choose to behave. Well, here's what an assertive driver might say: "I will not allow you to behave like this on my bus. I will not drive any further until everyone stops yelling and gets into their seats. No child will stop me from driving a safe bus. No child will stop the other passengers from having a safe and pleasant trip." The most effective driver, of course, is the assertive driver. Give positive feedback for students who demonstrate adaptive behavior. They have intervention skills for handling negative student behaviors. They have expectations for students to follow. And they have consequences that the students receive when they choose not to follow the rules. So why do students misbehave? Well, number one, for power and control. Number two, they misbehave for revenge. And number three, they misbehave for attention. So some people have some ideas about what to expect out of student behavior that get them into trouble. And so now we're going to talk about the 6 myths about student behavior. Number one, ignoring student misbehavior will make it go away. Some students know how to push all the right buttons to annoy a driver. When ignored, they will continue to misbehave when they know the driver is still being annoyed by their behavior. Those students who require attention will get attention one way or another, whether it results in negative or positive consequences. Let me tell you a story about a student that I had that is such a good example of this myth about student behavior. You know, some kids just need attention, and they don't care how they're going to get it. They will get attention whether it's in a positive or a negative way. And tell me if this isn't true. You know that kid that can just push your button, can make you see red? That kid comes to school every single day. They never miss a day of school. Well, we know why that is. Their parents don't want them at home. So if you have a child that is just going to annoy you every single day, then you need to change the way you behave with that child. Because once again, it's the insane person that does the same thing day in and day out, expecting a different result. My last year teaching, I had the greatest time ever. I was teaching physical education. I had mostly juniors and seniors, kids who wanted to take physical education. And it was wonderful. I had learned that skill of you can't make them behave, you gotta make them want to behave for you. If I had a student that didn't like a call I made or got up in my face about something, there'd be 2, 3 other boys that would jump in and say, hey man, don't bother her, she doesn't deserve that. That's a lot of fun when you get into a position like that. But I had this one class that was a freshman class, and I had this one boy in my class that every day just had to do something. He never dressed out for PE, and that's fine if you want to fail and you don't want, you have to be there. You don't have to dress out, but, you need to sit on the sideline and behave while I deal with the rest of the kids in my class. But every day, that student would find something to do to aggravate me. Pretty soon, we're butting heads, and I'm having to discipline him, and it got to the point where I just dreaded this class. And I was sitting in my 3rd period planning, getting ready to go to this fourth period class that I just dreaded. And I got to thinking, this kid is controlling my happiness. I should be controlling his happiness. And so I thought, there's got to be a way for me to try to get this kid to like me. Maybe if he'll like me, he'll behave for me. So I decided I was going to start having just general conversation with the kid. Because it dawned on me that about the only thing he heard coming out of my mouth was sit down, be quiet, stop doing that. And so as we were leaving the locker room, I decided, I'm just going to have a conversation with the kid. And it's not always all that easy to strike up a conversation with a kid that's aggravated you. You're human. And it's much easier to like those kids that adapt to your environment and are good for you than it is for those kids that don't adapt to your environment and make your life miserable. But I forced myself into having conversation with him, asking him what he was going to do over the weekend, what shows does he like to watch on TV, is there a movie he's been to lately, where does he live, what does he enjoy doing after school. And the first time I started chatting with him, he looked at me like I was growing horns. Like, what are you talking to me? But I persisted, and it took just about 2 weeks. And I finally got up the nerve one day as we were coming in from playing softball that I asked him, would he mind carrying in the equipment for me? And lo and behold, he did it. And the next morning, he showed up at the locker room, and he asked, could he carry the equipment out? It took about 2 weeks, and that kid's behavior turned 180 degrees around. Now, he didn't go from being a bad kid to a good kid. I changed the way I dealt with him. And he just wanted attention. And he was going to get attention one way or another, whether it was by being bad and having to have me get after him, or good. So to me, it was just a lot more fun to give him positive attention and have him enjoying and not aggravating me every day in class than it was to just ignore him and try to punish him when he misbehaved. The second myth about managing behavior is that students will obey the bus rules if they understand their importance. Well, many drivers will attempt to explain the rationale behind a rule when the student is breaking it. Students who have chosen to break a rule or be otherwise disruptive often do not care that they're being childish, and no amount of convincing will get them to understand why following the rule was important in the first place. Number 3, that you have to understand what happened before you can impose the consequences. Well, let's talk about this. When 2 students begin fighting, it's mutual combat. Asking them what is going on will not likely provide much useful information. Unless it's obvious that one child was victimized by the other, both children can easily be disciplined for fighting. It's also important that we teach students to allow the driver to be the mediator, and that will help prevent future fights. Another myth, number 4. Within a few days, students will follow rules with a good student management plan in place. Well, a solid bus management plan does not guarantee that students will obey within a few days and never act up again. Even the best drivers with the most well-behaved group will have repeat rule breakers and have to follow through with their discipline plan again and again. The key to a good student management plan is that it is simple to implement and is easy to remain consistent. Number 5, preventative student management will make all students obey. Well, while prevention is the best bus management strategy, it will not cause all students to behave. New drivers in particular need to be aware of the fact that they will have disruptive, disobedient, and out-of-control students. And finally, number 6, sending a student to the principal for consequences should fix the behavior and cause the student to behave from that point on. Well, the principal does not have magical powers to modify behavior that has taken years to develop. The best we can hope with consequences is the student will think twice before doing it again and maybe choose desirable adaptive behavior. And you know, kids are not a whole lot different than you and I. I'd like you to think to yourself as you sit there and watch this, when you were a kid, were you taught not to touch the stove because you'll get burned? Most of us were. And I'd like to see a show of hands of how many of y'all have never been burnt on the stove. Well, you're curious, you're careless, you touch that stove, like, oh man, that's gonna leave a mark. And so you were taught not to touch the stove, you'll get burned, but what happens? Most of you have been burnt on the stove. And think about this, of you all that have been burnt on the stove, how many got burnt once and never got burnt again? You get careless, you forget about what you're doing, and you touch that stove and, oh man, I'm gonna think twice before I do that again. That is much like the consequences that we deliver students. We can't guarantee that delivering a consequence is going to fix that student's behavior. What we can hope is that they will think twice before they do it again. Now we're going to talk about the 10 most common behavior management mistakes that educators make. Number 1, that you punish the entire busload. You know, it's extremely rare that every single bus rider has been guilty of misbehavior. Although the driver may feel that the whole group has conspired against them, it's worth taking the time to make sure that you are only punishing the wrongdoers. Punishing the whole group will only serve to alienate students who have made an effort to behave. Another mistake is shouting at the group. Although your shouting may be aimed at a handful of troublemakers, every single student will be subject to the verbal assault directed at the miscreants. Well-behaved students don't deserve this. Using sarcasm. Students hate this, and it'll make them feel small, leading to resentment and further behavior at a later date. Clear explanation of the rules they have broken, and the consequence is all that's necessary. Personal attacks on the character of the student should also be avoided at all times. Unfair punishment. Sometimes you will miss what led up to bad behavior and only discipline one student when others have been guilty of provoking the situation. This can be avoided by watchfulness and by responding to misbehavior as soon as it occurs. Consequences don't anger students. Injustice does. Is it fair? Inconsistency. Overlooking misbehavior in some pupils while punishing others for the same offense will undermine your authority with a group. Ignoring misbehavior one day and jumping all over a student for the same behavior the next is confusing. Shouting. Shouting is a form of verbal assault. Although raising your voice may be necessary to forestall a dangerous situation, shouting should never be used as a weapon or to dominate or intimidate a student. Not following agreed bus management strategies. If the bus management strategy allows for warnings, make sure all students are always given the benefit of agreed warnings before a consequence is applied. Taking it personally. If a student uses abusive language towards an adult, there may be all sorts of reasons for this, often to do with the student's own issues, habits, and problems. Treat it as an infraction of the bus rules and sanction accordingly without allowing yourself to become personally upset or angry. The rest of the group will respect you for it, and it will also provide a useful model for the students on how to cope with bullying behaviors in others. Losing focus on the primary behavior. A badly behaved student will often try to deflect the driver's focus by committing further separate acts of misbehavior. Keeping your focus on dealing with the initial infraction, do not let yourself be diverted by secondary behaviors, although you can also tackle these at a later time. Over rigidity. As long as bus rules are being observed, a driver who is flexible about working styles and arrangements can demonstrate that clear boundaries actually lead to greater flexibility. Now we're going to discuss some of the tricks of the trade. There's a notion of positive directions. You want to tell the student what you want them to do, not what you want them to stop doing. So you would tell a child, please sit down, instead of don't stand up. Please be quiet, instead of saying stop shouting. There's a trick that I call the reminder. Short and sweet. What are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? You know what will happen if you continue to. There's a notion of a power message. It's okay to relate your feelings. You can say, Sam, I really get annoyed when you yell on the bus. Please talk quietly. Then there's the broken record technique. You state what you want the student to do. If the student argues with you, you repeat yourself. And you repeat what you want up to 3 times. The broken record technique stops the arguments, helps you stay in control and not get upset, and makes the student realize that you mean business and you'll do as you say. We're now going to talk about 12 actions that can escalate major misbehavior. Number 1, using physical force. How many times have we been dealing with a child and that child wants to walk away? And he's tired of listening to you. They only have about 30 seconds worth of attention span for somebody telling them what they're doing wrong. And that kid gets tired of listening to you and just starts to walk away. But you know what? You're not quite done telling them what it is you need to tell them. So you reach out and you grab his elbow in an effort to stop him. And what does the kid do? He yanks his elbow away. And what happens then? Well, the next day, when he's describing to the principal why you got a good right cross across the chin, he's going to say, he grabbed my arm and I just ripped my arm away. I didn't really mean to hit him. So using physical force when you're dealing with misbehavior is definitely a no-no. Making unsubstantiated accusations. When you're dealing with misbehavior, you really need to deal with the behavior that you observe. You may have another child say that he did this or he did that, but you need to deal with the behavior you observed. Because if you criticize the child for something that he actually didn't do, he will end up focusing on what he didn't do and get all the way away from what he actually did do. So it's best just to stick with what you observe. Yelling. Yelling and shouting is a verbal assault on children and can cause the behavior to escalate. Acting superior. It's my way or the highway. Giving commands and demands as opposed to options. Mimicking the student. Mimicking the student is making fun of them. You make fun of a student who's angry, and it's liable to escalate the situation. Using sarcasm and put-downs. Sarcasm and humor are closely tied together. Humor is what we do when we're trying to lighten the mood and make things fun. And humor is good. But sarcasm is that tongue-in-cheek, it's fun for the people saying it and for the people listening, but for the person it's directed towards, it's got a bitter taste. And you need to stay away from sarcasm because that can escalate into major misbehavior. Using tense body language such as crossed arms and clenched fists. Backing a student into a corner where they have no choices. There are some kids, if they feel like they are backed into a corner, will come out fighting. Moralizing and preaching. Making comparisons with others. I think every person, as they grow up, have been subjected to someone comparing them, whether it's comparing them to a younger or an older sibling, or comparing them to someone sitting next to them on the bus. Nobody likes to be compared to somebody else. You need to deal with their behavior and their behavior only. And having double standards. Do it as I say, not as I do. You need to model the behavior you want those children to exhibit. To prevent major confrontations, you need to control your own emotion. You need to focus on the misbehavior, not the student. You need to diffuse or delay if possible, and you need to model appropriate behavior. In this section, we're going to talk about what makes for effective student management. Number one, it's easier to get easier. Many educators make the mistake of starting the school year with a poor discipline plan. Students quickly assess the situation and realize what they will be allowed to get away with. Once you set a precedent of allowing disruptions, it can be very hard to start better student management and discipline techniques. However, it's never tough to get easier as the year goes on. Fairness is really the key. Students have a distinct sense of what is and what is not fair. You must act fairly for all students if you expect to be respected. If you do not treat all students equitably, you will be labeled as unfair and students will not be keen to follow your rules. Make sure that if your best student does something wrong, they too get punished for it. Avoid confrontations in front of students. Whenever there is a confrontation on the bus, there is a winner and a loser. Obviously, you need to keep order and discipline on your bus. However, it's much better to deal with discipline issues privately than cause a student to lose face in front of their friends. Stop disruptions with a little humor. Sometimes all it takes is for everyone to have a good laugh to get things back on track. Many times, however, people confuse good humor with sarcasm. While humor can quickly diffuse a situation, sarcasm may harm your relationship with the students involved. Use your best judgment, though, and realize that what some people may think is funny, others find to be offensive. And keep high expectations. Expect that your students will behave, not that they will disrupt. Reinforce this with the way you speak to your students. When you load in the afternoon, tell your students your expectations. For example, you might say, I expect you will sit and talk quietly and respect others on the bus. And be consistent. One of the worst things you can do is to not enforce your rules consistently. If one day you ignore misbehaviors and the next day you jump on somebody for the smallest infraction, your students will quickly lose respect for you. Your students have the right to expect you to basically be the same every day. Moodiness is not allowed. Once you lose your students' respect, you also lose their attention and their desire to please you. We've learned a lot in this unit so far, and as a little bit of a review, we're going to spend some time going over the different concepts about building your community on your bus. First of all, honor students' personal space. Different ethnicities have different comfort zones for touch and personal space. Provide 3 positive comments for every 1 corrective action. This is our reinforcement density, so that the kids hear 3 positive remarks for every time you have to do a corrective action. Seat problem students near the front of the bus. Greet students as they board the bus. Call them by name, compliment their hair, what they're wearing, little things to say. Don't take attacks on your authority personally. Don't trade sarcastic remarks with students. Don't give students ultimatums, give them options. Don't get into a power struggle with a student. Some people feel as though they have to win right here, right now, on this spot. And deflecting the punishment or the consequences when you can be with a kid one-on-one is a much better tactic to take. Students respond to positive rewards for appropriate behavior. Develop a rapport with your students. Maintain seating charts and enforce seating assignments. Don't prejudge students by their gender or ethnicity. Verbalize behavioral expectations early and consistently enforce them. If a student challenges or refuses your directions, repeat those directions in the same unemotional tone of voice. Praise publicly, criticize privately. Remove the audience for an acting out student. Praise commands for what you want versus what you don't want them to do. Don't threaten consequences you can't enforce. A handshake with eye contact is appropriate for those willing to engage. Those students who require a lot of attention will do negative things to gain your attention if you don't give them positive attention. Give feedback on appropriate behavior. Provide honest and specific feedback. Talk to the students about their world. Show concern and interest. Give notes of recognition as feedback. Praise small steps. Mastery takes time. Kids need to know they can always come back. You don't know how many times as I sat as an assistant principal listening to students who have been sent to the office for misbehavior, tell me, you know, you might as well not even send me back to class or back to that bus. That teacher hates my guts. I can't even breathe sideways. And they're jumping all over me, nailing me for stuff that he doesn't even speak to anybody else about. Kids need to have the notion that they can mess up and they can take the consequences for their behavior and still return to that environment. After all, they are kids. They are boundary testers. That's what they do. And sometimes they just act impulsively and they don't even think about what they're doing. But we need, because we're the educators, to make them feel as though they can mess up, they can take their consequences, and they can come back and be successful in their environment. Be objective and non-judgmental. Show that you are human. Minimize the power differential in communication. You are in charge, but you don't have to make them feel small. Address problem behavior directly and immediately. Explain expectations and consequences clearly. And understand that youngsters may not remember what we teach them, but they will always remember how we treated them. I approach all my student management training from a school safety point of view. People are often asking me, what does it take to make for a safe bus environment? Well, number one, I believe that you have to believe that it can happen in your environment. If you believe bad things can happen, then you'll be scanning your environment and looking and not just having your blinders on and, you know, I'm just picking up this pack of dogs and getting them from point A to point B and hoping that they behave. That you actually are scanning your environment and looking for things to go wrong so that you can approach and cure these problems before they blow up in your face. But I also believe that a major component of having a safe bus is the rapport you have with the kids. Kids know what's going on. They know who's carrying weapons in school. They know who's going to get in a fight after school. They know what's going on. All we got to do is get them to come and tell us. But kids are afraid to tell. Because in our society, we actually teach our children that telling is a bad thing. Everything that even describes telling is a negative word. It's a tattletale, a rat fink, right? A narc. It's all has a negative connotation. And kids have some legitimate fears about telling, don't they? They'll worry that the adult will handle the information badly and the bad guy will come back and retaliate against them. They worry that they'll get their friend in trouble. They're worried that all the rest of the kids will think that they're a rat fink and a snitch. So how do we break that code of silence with our kids? Well, if we can get a rapport to where they trust us, to where they will come and tell us when things aren't right, when there's something unsafe and they know full and well it's not safe, then I think we are 99% down the road of making certain that things don't go wrong in our environment. So develop that kind of rapport. And who do you think they'd be more likely to come and tell and trust to tell? That bus driver that they thought was mean, that they all conspired to make her life miserable? Or that bus driver that had that 3-to-1 reinforcement density that caused those kids to think that she was a nice lady, we wouldn't do that to her? I think it's obvious. I think that they would be more trusting of the nice bus driver, that she has the best chance of somebody notifying her if something bad is going to happen, to where she can intervene before it does. So I would like for you to think about breaking that code of silence with your kids.
As a bus driver, there's a lot riding on your abilities. After all, you're responsible for the safety of everyone on your bus and those who are operating vehicles around you. Driving in today's hectic environment can be demanding, but the safety of your vehicle begins before you ever get behind the wheel. It begins with a thorough, comprehensive pre-trip inspection. After all, if you don't inspect your vehicle before you operate it, how do you know it's safe to operate? We're not expecting you to know everything about how a bus operates or how to be a mechanic, but we are expecting you to do what you can to help ensure the safety of your vehicle. This is not a good inspection. This is not a good inspection. This is a good inspection. You see, we can't possibly cover every single item you need to inspect on your vehicle in this short video. But it's important for you to understand that it's more than just checking the boxes. It's looking for potential hazards. This form is just a guide. A pre-trip inspection doesn't take a lot of time, but it does make a big difference. As you approach the vehicle, notice how it sits. Is it leaning? If so, it could mean a flat tire or a problem with the shocks. Look to both sides of the bus for downed power lines, tree limbs, people, or other objects in or around the bus that could present a hazard. Look under the bus for leaks from the water pump, power steering pump, oil filters, or fuel tank. Note any leaks on your form. Next, move to the front of the bus and check the condition and operation of all lights and lenses, including the turn signals, four-way hazard, and reflectors. How is the windshield? Is it clean? No cracks? How about the wipers? The mirrors must be secure, not be broken or cracked. Mark any damage or other unsafe conditions on your form. Then move to the left side of the bus. Are the clearance lights working properly and not broken? The windows must not be cracked or dirty. Does the stop sign work properly? The brakes, what could be more important than that? How does the brake drum look? It shouldn't be cracked or welded, and the brake pads shouldn't be obstructed and have at least 1/4 inch of wear remaining. The front tires must have no cuts or abrasions, and a tread depth of no less than 4/32 of an inch. Check the air pressure to make sure it's at manufacturer's specifications or standard for your district. Secure the valve cap on the stem. What happens if you don't know how to inspect a certain item on the checklist, or you are unsure of where an item is located? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Find out what it is so you can inspect it. Remember, your safety and the safety of others is on the line. The connections in the battery box should be tight to the touch, with no corrosion on the cables, connectors, or battery surface. As you move toward the rear of the bus, the brakes and tires should be inspected just as you did at the front of the vehicle. As you move to the back of the bus, check the condition and operation of all lights and lenses. Make sure the strobe light on top is operating properly. Check the emergency exit door. Does it operate properly from the outside? Does the buzzer sound when the door is open? As you move along the right side of the vehicle, make sure all lights are secure and work properly, and windows not broken or cracked. The wheels should be inspected as before. Is the service door secure with no broken or cracked glass? Next, you'll need to check the engine compartment. Make sure you inspect every item on your checklist. Like we said, if you have any questions, get them answered before you operate the bus. Don't take a chance. You'll need to inspect the inside of the bus as well. Start with the stairs and handrail. Does the stairwell light work? Walk to the back of the bus, checking that each seat is secure and not missing any hardware. Emergency exit doors must not be obstructed. All emergency exit windows and roof-mounted emergency exits must be secure and function properly. Buzzer sounding when opened. In case of a breakdown or other emergency, you must have 3 red triangles, a fire extinguisher, and a first aid kit and body fluid kit. You should perform your inspection in the same circular motion every time. Your inspection form is organized this way and will make it easier for you to inspect everything in the most efficient manner rather than skipping around, looking here then looking there. Remember, we can't cover everything on your checklist for your particular vehicle. These are just some key items that deserve attention. After your inspection, you'll need to perform a few brake tests to ensure that the brakes are working properly. After all, the brakes are, more often than not, your last line of defense in an emergency or potentially dangerous situation. If equipped with hydraulic brakes, pump the brake pedal 3 times and hold it down for 5 seconds. The pedal should not move. To test the mechanical manual park brake, put the transmission in gear. Release your park brake, let the bus roll forward, and reset the park brake. The bus should stop rolling. If equipped with air brakes, the following 7-step test must be performed. Test air leakage rate. With a fully charged air system, typically 125 pounds per square inch, turn off the engine, cover the service brake and release the park brake, and time the air pressure drop. The loss rate should be less than 2 psi in 1 minute for single vehicles. Then apply 90 psi or more with the brake pedal. After the initial pressure drop, if the air pressure falls more than 3 psi in 1 minute for single vehicles, the air loss rate is too much. Check for air leaks and fix before driving the vehicle. Otherwise, you could lose your brakes while driving. Test low pressure warning signal. With the engine off and you have enough air pressure so that the low pressure warning signal is not on, turn the electrical power on and step on and off the brake pedal to reduce air tank pressure. The low air pressure warning signal, audible and light, must come on before the pressure drops to less than 60 psi in the air tank, or the tank with the lowest air pressure in dual air systems. Test safety spring brake lockup. Step on and off the brake pedal to reduce the air tank pressure. The parking brake knob should pop out when the air pressure falls to the manufacturer's specification, usually in a range between 40 to 20 psi. This causes the spring brakes to come on. Check rate of air pressure buildup. When the engine is at operating RPM, the pressure should build from 85 to 100 psi within 45 seconds in dual air systems. If the vehicle has larger than minimum air tanks, the buildup time can be longer and still be safe. Check the manufacturer's specifications. In single air systems pre-1975, typical requirements are pressure buildup from 50 to 90 psi within 3 minutes, with the engine at an idle speed of 600 to 900 RPM. Check air compressor, governor, cut in and cut out pressures. Continue to idle engine until governor cuts out. Compressor should engage by 100 psi and should disengage by 125 psi. Test service brakes. Wait for normal air pressure. Release the parking brake. Move the vehicle forward slowly, about 5 miles an hour, and apply the brakes firmly using the brake pedal. Note any vehicle pulling to one side, unusual feel, or delayed stopping action. Please note that the first 3 steps of this test are required knowledge in the correct order to pass the skills test. Proceed en route only after the entire pre-trip inspection has been completed. Remember, the important thing is that you inspect everything that's required for your vehicle. Just because it's something you do all the time, don't become complacent. That one time you're tired or in a hurry and decide to skip your inspection could be the time there's a problem with the safety of your bus. Do you want to take that chance? Is it worth the risk? No, it's not. Pre-trip inspections are a vital link in the safety process that cannot be ignored. Do your part to ensure the safety of your bus.
what we're just gonna kind of hit and miss, highlight some stuff. We will have a meeting, I will explain a little more later, but anyway, after convocation, when you guys come back on the 15th, we'll have a meeting later that day and we'll have the routes by then. Enrollment will have been completed. We'll have more idea of what kids are on what bus. Those are still being tweaked by the number of enrollment that we have. So we'll go over that in, let's say 10 minutes, okay?
Feel the love.
Thank you. They have the dates wrong at first.
Well, we'll start anyway. Well, looks like we're gonna get done early. Even after running late, how about that? Okay? There's just a few things. We did not put together the packets like in the folders like you guys usually get every, at the beginning when we did this with the routes and all that stuff. And let me kind of explain why. First of all, our driver's handbook has not been board approved yet. So I'm just gonna kind of hit the highlights that are changing. When you come back on the 15th, we'll have those for you. Okay, after centralized enrollment, whatever change went, anyway, we think the routes are pretty much set, but we really don't know until we get through enrollment. The one good feature that we just got this week, and we hope it works out extremely well, is the parents can now go online from their phone, from their computer, and register their child for the bus. So we may not have that long line that we've had in the past, and they will get put on the bus quicker, and we will have all their information that the parent put in, so it won't be our fault when something's not right. So those are some changes that are coming. I know it kind of puts things off a little bit, but we have convocation on the 15th when you guys come back. I kind of put down that you guys can come in at 7:30. We can clock in, you'll get your badges, all that stuff. At 7:45, we will head over. We can take a bus if y'all want to park here, because you know how limited the parking lot is at the junior high. So we'll get on a bus and we'll all go together if you want. If you want to drive over, that's up to you, but the bus will leave at 7:45, okay? 30 minutes after convocation's over, 30 minutes or so, we will have a transportation meeting where we will have all those routes and all that stuff for you.
Your day.
I'm thinking positive, okay? I'm trying to get the positive vibe going here. But let me tell you a few things that are changing. First of all, from last year's book, the time clock, it said that you would clock in 30 minutes before the little thing on your route sheet and all that good stuff. We kind of simplified that to say 30 minutes before your route starts. If your route starts at 6 o'clock, then we need you here at 5:30. That gives you your pre-trip and all those good things. If you're not till 6:30, be here at 6, okay? You will have to clock in and out at the transportation terminal, or when we have those meetings, down in Cody's office, you can do it there. There will be no more mobile or clocking in and out on your phone or whatever it is. It has to be done at a terminal, school terminal. So that's basically the major change there. Absenteeism, you guys all know, we got a little out of hand last year. So please be mindful. I understand emergencies come up, things like that, and we had some people that were out long term, but we had a lot of absenteeism last year. We had a lot of people that showed up late, and in the new handbook it says if you show up late, it may be counted as an absentee. Okay, so please be on time for work. The dress code is going to change a little bit. Mainly, the high school dress code changed. You can kind of refer to that as part of it. I kind of tried to blend it with what the teachers also what their dress code was. So kind of be looking for those changes as well. The other change that we kind of need to go over.
Any indication on what the dress code is changed to?
Well, don't do what she did. Okay? We can't have any of these gaping armholes. Okay? Shorts are going to have to be Bermuda length. no spaghetti straps, no, raw straps showing, you know, undergarments, stuff like that. If you wear tights or leggings or whatever, you're gonna have, the shirts are gonna have to be at least finger length, you know. You guys kind of get the picture. I mean, look professional. I mean, yes, we drive a bus, we don't have to wear good clothes like the teachers, but we need to kind of conform to. We can't expect the students to dress one way and we dress another. So.
So you say we can't wear sleeveless shirts when it's 104 degrees in the bus down there?
Well, not where they got these skating, you know. Okay?
Just don't wear your bra.
Shoes, that hasn't changed for us. That's always been in there. Closed-toed shoes, Sandy's got on a perfect pair. If you want to wear, you know, that's the kind of sandal you can wear. What I've got on is not acceptable. My toes are showing. Okay? Yeah, I got it strapped on at the heel like what was before, but it has changed since then. As you know, the accident procedures have changed. We kind of went over those as we had few extra accidents last year than we've had in the past. So mainly for your driver part, it's pretty simple. You're going to secure your bus. You're going to put out your triangles if you have to. You know, you're going to call in to dispatch. First thing I want you to do though is ask those students, is everybody okay? Okay? Then when you start, I'm sorry.
More than once, ask them several times.
When you start doing your seating chart, ask them individually, because you're going to hear this whole, you know, big thing when you ask the general population. So when you're doing your seating chart, ask them again, are you sure you're okay? All right? Those are the big main things that Dr. Simpson wanted us to stress. The student comes first. What happens after that? You know, we want to make sure everybody's okay. So you should always have those forms in your clipboard or your expanding file, whatever it is, because you'll be on the bus at all times. Just never know when it might happen. Those are the main highlights in the book that are going to change. We are still working on a standard operating procedure. I learned when I talked to Dr. Simpson that our handbook is policy. So what is in policy is different than what is in procedure. Okay? Basically what that means is whatever is in the policy book is law. You know, if you break it, you could be terminated. There's that possibility. Yes, in our handbook, there's a lot of procedures, so there's still some kind of, but we're working on the actual, what they call standard SOP or standing operating procedures. And that's where driving on the right roads will come in, you know, the roads we want you to. As you all know and have seen all the orange cones in front of Harrison Street, in front of the Rock, we can't do that anymore. It went from a 12-ton bridge, which we were pushing, to a 3-ton. So, we're going to have to work around that. What we'll probably do when you leave the junior high is we'll probably turn there at the courthouse, you know, go up. It's because it's a 4-way stop. And then if you go up to Broad, you know, you've got another 4-way stop and another 4-way stop. So that's probably the safest way we're going to be able to get around that. Okay? Let's see. What else do I want to cover? Like I said, this is going to go pretty quickly, I think. Mark your calendars. Yes, we do have back the 15th. I already mentioned that. We'll have those 2 meetings that day. On the 16th, we're here at 7 o'clock. You can put in your 6 hours, so you know you'll have your routes by then. We need you to drive your routes that day. Make sure you get accurate times back to us. Mark your calendar also. That 15th at 2:30. United Way will be here instead of trying to do it on a morning after we've all been driving and stuff. We're going to try to do it those 3 days before we get started. So that's another thing that I know all of you don't participate, not all of you attend, but there will be a 2:30 right-of-way meeting on the 15th. Which helps you go to Harrison Street. Oh, one of the new updates, our GPS is now in our radios, and it is live GPS. So we can track you, so that should something happen, and you have an accident, you get stuck, we know exactly where you are.
And if you're speeding.
We know if you're speeding.
If you're not following your route.
Yeah. It's an excellent safety feature for you all. I mean, it's not like we're gonna be, oh my gosh, you know, that's not its purpose at all. A lot of its purpose is to make our routes more efficient by using the exact, correct times. It's, like I say, it's a safety feature for you all. When you say, I'm stuck, we know, we've got every minute. You can't go very far in a minute that we don't know where you are. Okay? Let's see. Jane, do you have anything?
Shelley, what time did you say for the 15th we got clock in?
Well, we can, I said you can start being here at 7:30.
Okay.
7:45, we will,
Thank you.
okay? We'll load a bus for those of us who all want to travel over together, whatnot. Jane? Paperwork.
The only thing I have to say is that it is of the utmost importance that you do your paperwork this year. We do have a new system, new routing system. Still learning it. Everything is not quite done yet, so I hope that we have the routes for you. I don't know if we'll be able to print maps or not, but we will be able to print out the written part like I give you. It will have the check boxes. It will be an everyday thing. You'll get a new one for each day. You'll get a printout with a roster of all your kids, phone number, address, parent's name. So you use that to do your write-ups from, or you'll use that to do your accident reports. You're not going to have that big stack of writer sheets anymore. That was kind of a mess. Most likely, you'll be able to just use your little folder and keep your stuff in.
Good job, ladies. We got you the other ones in case you could,
Oh, we don't want
have
to
other
get
things that you want to put
old
in.
school.
You can keep your notes because you are responsible for any note you get from a student. You keep those notes even though we don't allow them to ride with the note. Take that note and keep it, so you got it as a record when they try to sneak somebody on. Let me think. The only difference is every day we have to print off a new roster. I tried to get them to do it once a week, but they won't let me do that. Make sure you turn in every day your half sheets. Those are for Cody. He gets very upset if you don't turn those in. He keeps track of your daily riders with that, so he knows how many you're having, if your bus is overloaded, if it's not. And I am going to say this, we have canceled 4 routes, and we've done some switching. Some people have been changed from one route to another. Not everybody, so don't get too worried. Not everybody's been changed, it's just been a few. Not as punishment in any way, not as any kind of corrective action. It's because we know and think that you'll, Suzanne, for one, we know how she does things, and we know she can do a good job on that bus, and we have asked her if she would kindly please do that. Her route was eliminated, for one thing. Bus 6 was eliminated. Now 6 is back, but it's on a different route. So anyway, we need to make sure you fill out your weeklies. Make sure those are properly done. Those are for the state. We get in trouble if those aren't there. Can we get fined for that? Yes, we can. Get fined for that, and it can be a pretty stiff fine. So make sure those are done, that those are turned in, that they're done right, so that they're legible. If you write anything on it, the guys can pull stuff off. They can, if they need to, they can go back and look at those. They can go back and look at your dailies. And if you don't That way they can understand. Anything else?
Not for your part. I'm gonna go over the bus evacuations, kind of that
Hey,
schedule.
we could write on those sheets we send to the state. If you want a good sheet, give us back our $585 billion. So they didn't give us $585,000.
Yeah, that'll work, okay.
We'll just hold it.
One other thing that I want to add, I know we go over this all the time, but when you're given those to check off your students, I really need to know when you don't have that child, if that child graduated and they're no longer there, because there are still a few issues that we have to clear up from the old system to the new. So please come talk to me, come see me. If it's not arranged right, if you're going down to Waterloo and then back up to 105, let me know so we can fix that on your sheet so that things are done the way they're supposed to be done. So if you guys cooperate with me, I would appreciate it so much. And that's it. Joanne?
On the 9th and 10th, what is the time that we need to be administration?
Yeah, let's see, I think she had, I will let you guys know, but I think she had to start scheduling at 8.
8?
She said 8:30. 8:30, okay. I was gonna say, it was, I will get that to you. Because I'm not doing that one, so. No, I tried to put it in, but anyway, okay. So bus evacuations, here's what I learned last year, guys, and I didn't know it. It said that you had to do it in the first 10 days. I thought that meant the first 10 days of school. No, that is the first 10 calendar days.
Wow.
Well, because we start on Friday, and we have 2 weekends in there, that pretty much cuts our days down to 1 week. So we will be doing all of our evacuations in 1 week. And it will be the week that school starts. I'm not even gonna count Friday, okay? I know we're still running around with chickens, but,
You gonna do it in the
ducks,
evening again?
all this stuff. Yes, we're gonna do them in the evening.
Okay.
I have that schedule set up, but I will get all that stuff to you in that packet. We are going to do 2. We are going to do the back emergency door, and we're going to do the railroad crossing, and that's where Mr. Greg comes in. Woo-hoo! He's going to explain the railroad crossing to you one more time.
You stop. So the railroad crossing, all you know, it's changed. We don't use the ambers no more. You use the 4-way flashers. So the procedure is, when you come to a railroad crossing, you are 100 to 300 feet. You're going to turn on your 4-way hazard lights.
You didn't see your little name on there?
I did.
Great. Yeah. You're gonna come up to the railroad tracks, and you're not gonna be any closer than 15 feet, no further away than 50 feet. Come to a complete stop. Be sure that your driver's window is open. Get your kids to be quiet. Turn off all your noise-making stuff, radios, fans, and all that. You're gonna open the service door. You're gonna look and listen to both directions.
Turn the amber.
Oh yeah, make sure your mask is on to your, your floating lights.
Yeah,
Those
gotta
are
just
turned
go
off.
on.
If your reds come on, that is a
$45
violation,
fine.
and you get a fine for it.
Yep.
I'm sure the reds do not come on. You should be able to see
1,000 feet to the left, 1,000 feet to the right, 1,000
No
feet to the left.
obstructions. If there's an obstruction, you need to find another route or something. That's easier said than done if you're already there, right? So, anyway, you're gonna look both directions. If you're clear, do not move that bus with that door open? Right. Be sure that you close that door before you move. If you're clear, close the door. Proceed across the tracks. If you have multiple tracks, be sure that you have enough space between each track that you can stop. If you don't, you continue to go. But if you've got, I believe it's 70 feet between each set of tracks on multiple tracks, you do have to stop at each one. And do that process until you clear it. Once you clear those tracks, when your back bumper clears the last rail, the last track, then you can turn off your hazard.
Not anymore. You turn them off before you go now.
Really?
Yep. That's the way it was to the whole training.
Wow. Well,
so what you do is you turn them off before you commit to go. Because once you commit to go, you just keep going.
I personally disagree with that.
I agree, but that's how they are.
But anyway, once you've cleared the tracks, if you still have your lights on, turn them on.
Good job, I'm kind of surprised. Guys, I believe we are done until Tuesday. Yes, questions? Pink card update. Pink card update. Those will, they said this last year, and I know they did, it is online now. Okay? In theory. In theory. Now, when we were down at OAPT meeting, and they said, we're gonna do this, all of a sudden, all these glitches started showing up, just like they did the year before. And the lady could not answer them for the most part. So I'm sitting there going, why is this year any different than the year before if you're not ready to do it? But anyway, they say we are. Susan got all of us entered with last year's information, which this is so crazy. You're almost going to be a year behind until they get some of these glitches worked out. But so you will not actually be receiving any people. Yeah, I mean, at least you know you have one. Okay. Yeah, mine hasn't even expired yet, but you have to read it. Yeah, mine the whole thing is crazy because it gives you an expiration date on your pink card. And if you don't renew it every year, it's not even good. Yeah. Any other questions or things? Huh?
What's going on Tuesday?
When you return on the 15th.
Oh, the 15th. Oh, okay.
Well, that was fine. Oh, yes, one moment, Greg's got some things on video, and I also have one other announcement.
When you do your videos, I mean, I don't mind people come and talk to me and tell me what's going on their bus and stuff, that's fine. I still need the paperwork though. I still need that request form filled out. Try to be descriptive as best as you can. Try to put the times down as close as to the time as whenever the incident may have happened. That helps me, that helps Marcia to be able to locate on that tape where it happened at. And plus, we need it for record too. Sometimes later down the road, something comes up, and we got to go find it for some reason or other. Try to be descriptive on it. Like I said, I don't mind if you come talk to me about it. That helps too.
Okay. Jane reminded me a couple more things. CPR training is this afternoon at 2 o'clock. There's only 10 spots. So we'll be scheduling some more for those of you who need it. I would like for those special needs people who didn't do it last year or whatever, their cards expired, I would like them to have the first choice. It is not required. So this is on your own. You don't get paid to do this. This is for your benefit. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But there are 10 spots available at 2 o'clock today. If you want to go, it's at Guthrie Fire Department. I'd like you to sign up so I know who's gonna be, or who wants to be there, that would be great. Number two, we do have, those that have asked for, have volunteered, and I've asked to volunteer, or you're not asked to volunteer, but anyway, to help with enrollment. We will have training at 2 o'clock in the driver's room. Also, those of you who are special needs, we are actually going to get some CPI training from Angie, which is some of the, how to restrain some of the students and stuff like that. That's what they were talking about when we were talking about the 9 and 10. Yeah, and some de-escalation, kind of what she hit on today. But anyway, that's for our special needs drivers. So if you hear those dates being floated around, that's what it is. Yes, sir.
Just an FYI, I was told, I think this is correct, that we, as drivers, we owe Russell a big thank you because he found out somehow or another we no longer have to do regeneration. Is that not correct?
It is in the works. We are trying to get the, there is program update.
Still working on getting the update, we don't have it yet?
Yeah, we don't have it yet. That we won't be running up and down the road doing regenerations. They'll be able to do what they call a hard regeneration in the shop. That's not a little update.
No thanks to Russell.
Right. Anything else before you guys? I appreciate y'all. Gosh, I have a year under my belt, and I appreciate you guys hanging with me. I'm still learning, and I appreciate y'all's feedback and the help that you've given me. I'm sure Cody feels the same way. He's got a year under his belt now. And it's just a heartfelt thank you for me to all of you.
How's the school go?
That new one?
There's still dirt.
There's some issues, but we're not in panic mode yet. Those are quotes from Dr. Simpson yesterday. There are issues, but don't panic yet. That's what he said. There was, I think it had a lot to do with, if I got the gist of what was going on. If you guys saw that property before, it was, okay, so we are doing a lot of dirt work. And I think that's where some of the issues are coming from.